This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Friday in August, boring not. We've got a great set of conversations for you this morning, led by Damian Sassower in for Paul Sweeney today. We'll get to yen carry in a minute. My key technical point, there's a 153 level now. We're not there yet, but just so much to talk about here, even into some economic data today. Just met in there with a few story stocks that are going around. But really, Damian, to get set to get into September. See you in September. What are you focused on in your writing at Bloomberg Intelligence as you frame out September?
Well, I'm just looking at the decomposition of the U.S. 10-year. I mean, if you just look at break-evens here, I mean, look, it's the real yield. We talk about the 10-year real yield. It's still at the cycle lows of 177, but break-evens have been all over the board here. And you got 5-year break-evens back above 200 basis points, 5-year forward inflation swaps back above 240 basis points, Tom. That means that inflation is not behind us yet. It's something you still have to have a little bit of concern about.
Conversation of the week. Stephen Rasciuto at Mizuho was absolutely brilliant on global disinflation. Kona Hake will join us on commodities against an America with a new reset to a relatively higher level of inflation. Key topic Wednesday on the Gulf Stream out to Jackson Hole. Me and Bramo looking forward to that. We're on Android Audio, Mental Block.
Android Auto.
Android Auto.
That's
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's August. Okay, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay as well, and on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Amanda Lynham all over me yesterday at BlackRock. She's loving YouTube out there. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Saving the day as always from the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Thank you very much. And we've got little movement in futures. That's despite the latest U.S. data that showed evidence of economic strength. Today, we'll get more data. We have a look at the housing market from housing starts and building permits. We'll also get a read on sentiment. So we have NASDAQ futures, little change, up about a point. Dow futures, little change, down about 8 points. S&P futures, down about 5 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.87%, and that's down 4 basis points. In Asia, stocks headed for their best weekly performance in over a year. Right now, we'll take a look at the Nikkei, up more than 3.5%. And the Japanese yen set for its sharpest weekly drop since May. We have the Japanese yen up about 6 cents a percent, 148.31 against the dollar. Meanwhile, the popular yen-centered carry trade making a comeback. Nomura Holdings says it's attracting corporate clients and hedge funds again. We'll head over to Texas Instruments. Their shares up 1%. The Biden administration said the company is set to receive $1.6 billion in CHIPS Act grants, also $3 billion in loans, and shares of Applied Materials down 3%. Yes, it's delivered an inline sales forecast, but that just wasn't enough for investors. They were looking for a bigger payoff from AI spending, and that's why those shares are lower. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Thanks so much, Lisa Mateo. Greatly appreciate it. We start strong. Veronica Clark joins us with Citigroup to get us, to get to Jackson Hole, but frankly, to do much more, to get to a Fed meeting at the end of September. Veronica, just to begin here, in the sleepy days of August, what is the Fed messaging? What are they signaling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that message has actually been changed after we got the latest round of inflation data on Wednesday. I think before Wednesday, Fed officials were still a bit cautious, still paying lip service to the idea that they want to see more, confidence, get more confidence on inflation slowing. But after we saw that, another favorable CPI reading on Wednesday, I think the focus is very quickly turning to the labor market. We've heard that from Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee,
right.
Bostic. I think they're getting a bit worried about this rise in the unemployment rate now.
Veronica, September 18, November 7th, December 18, using the Bloomberg Professional Service, I can get out to January 29 next year, March 19th next year, May 7th next year. Does Citigroup stand by a measured track of every meeting, a rate cut?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. We're penciling in even 50 basis point cuts to start this cutting cycle.
So you're starting. You still. Whoa. You still have on a 50 beep cut at the next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think for that, starting with that 50 basis points in September, the bar is relatively low. There is this sense in which, if they'd had that July employment data just a couple days earlier at that July FOMC meeting, they probably would have cut in July. Maybe you're making up for lost time a bit. The trend of the unemployment rate has just been consistently rising that, we will have one more employment report before September, but that's probably not enough to convince you that those risks are not asymmetric to the upside for the unemployment rate. So I think it's easy for them to start with a 50 in September.
Veronica, you mentioned CPI, trumped that. Let's talk about claims and retail sales, because that was the move this week in my mind. I mean, break-evens have come all the way back here. I mean, talk to us about your inflation expectations on a forward basis. What are you thinking here?
Yeah. In the longer medium term, I do think, maybe we can see some stickiness to inflation, but in the next 6 to 9 months, there are a lot of reasons to think that inflation will be, sustainably slowing here. Obviously we saw the slowing in the second half of last year. Maybe there's some residual seasonality issues. But this year it does seem like finally, shelter inflation is on a bumpy but downward trajectory.
Auto insurance.
Yeah, exactly. And demand has been softening. Wage growth has been slowing as the labor market loosens. A lot of reasons to think that inflation will look a lot more favorable next, year or so.
And Veronica, talk to us about the U.S. Treasury yield curve, right? I mean, 2s, 10s, we nearly broke back through zero. I mean, talk to us a little bit about what part of the yield curve you are most focused on in this environment.
Yeah, I think it really is that short end yield that I'm most focused on. I would expect that at some point we do, uninvert again, just as we're pricing, more aggressive cuts for the Fed. Of course, we have a bit more of an aggressive Fed path than the market is currently pricing. And we are still expecting to see more weakening in the labor market, recessionary risk just building. And I think that's, a story that kind of got, on the back burner this week with, some stronger retail sales, but that will probably come back at some point.
Yeah, Veronica, last question for you. I mean, Fed runoff, right? I mean, look, the Fed is in a deferred asset position, has been for the last 22 months, where it's receiving less coupon income than it pays out. Talk to us about your expectations for Fed tapering as we head into the end of this year.
Yeah. I think Fed officials have really tried to divorce, planning rate cuts with this idea that they can continue to run off the balance sheet. But that was in, an environment where we maybe are in a soft landing and they're cutting rates to just get, rates back to a neutral, level. If this is a weaker economy and they're cutting rates, for labor market activity concerns, I do think that they would probably end that runoff, at least by the end of the year.
I looked, Veronica, at the mess we're in the ART shift this week. To me, it's a sophomore debate, but I'll go there. Are we arguing about inflation, or are we arguing about GDP dynamics? Which matters more to Chairman Powell and Team Fed?
Yeah, I think we're very quickly turning the focus to the activity data and especially, of course, the labor market. We've had, a number of months now where inflation has slowed, but alongside that, the unemployment rate has been rising. And once you really do see the labor market breaking, once you really do get those layoffs, and we haven't seen abundant signs of that yet, but that doesn't mean that's not still to come. That is a much weaker activity backdrop.
Veronica Clark, thank you for helping us start strong today. Veronica Clark, it's Citigroup on our way to Jackson Hole. Really excited. Amber's setting up just a great group of conversations at Jackson Hole. We're thrilled to tell you, just as one, we believe Adam Posen will be with us with the Peterson Institute, who's always fiery in his analysis of the American economy and our political system within this election year. Red and green on the screen, giving it up a little bit. The VIX elevated 15.44. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, and Lisa. International mediators are holding a second day of negotiations with Israel to pause the war with Hamas in Gaza. According to Israeli media, the first day of talks mediated by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar made progress. Some families of hostages held in Gaza believe the latest round of ceasefire talks could be the last best chance to set their loved ones free. Former President Donald Trump gave his second news conference in as many weeks. At his New Jersey golf club, Trump says he's entitled to personal attacks against Vice President Kamala Harris.
I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president.
Meanwhile, Harris will hold a campaign rally in North Carolina today to talk about the economy. Bloomberg's Steve Potisk has a preview from Washington.
At a rally in North Carolina, Harris will propose a benefit for first-time homebuyers up to $25,000 in down payment support. That builds on a proposal from President Biden in his State of the Union address for a $10,000 tax credit for first-time buyers. Harris will also zero in on high food prices. She's expected to push for a federal ban on price gouging on groceries. Harris is putting particular emphasis on rising meat prices, which, she says, account for a large part of rising grocery bills. Harris said she would aim to enact the ban within her first 100 days. In Washington, Steve Potusk, Bloomberg Radio.
You can hear Harris's remarks live at 2:45 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg. A U.S.-Russian dual national sentenced to 12 years in prison for treason will mount a legal fight. A lawyer for Ksenia Kavana says she will appeal the verdict. Earlier this year, the 33-year-old former ballet dancer returned to Russia to see her family, and while there, her phone was confiscated, and police found evidence of a $52 donation to a Ukrainian charity. Russian authorities claim such money is used to purchase things like weapons and ammunition for Ukraine forces. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. August, we're going to get the nerd alert out of the way right now. Damian Sassower with us here and yen carry. Okay, I get what yen carry is, and I think most of our audience does. But with stronger yen down to a 141 level, a well over 5 standard deviation fitted move, I don't have any sense of getting back through resistance to a weaker yen until a 153. Why am I hearing about yen carry redo now only at a 148? I need 153 to get it done.
Well, Tom, I mean, what you're talking about is the spot FX rate, right? And what most people do, myself included, is when we reference the yen, we reference the movement in spot. We don't talk about the total return from investing, shorting the yen and investing in another currency, but more importantly, taking that 3-month deposit rate, that interest rate return. So places like South Africa, Turkey, Brazil, Colombia that have high rates, that interest rate return, that's a big part of your total return. So I'm looking at the 22 biggest emerging markets here relative to the yen. Year to date, only the Brazilian real on a total return basis is down year to date, and it's only down 1.2%. So the entire universe is still up.
This is critical. With all the doom and gloom from amateurs like me, folks, this is the way it is. Lisa Mateo, amateur. Michael Barr, amateur. Tom Keene, amateur. Damian Sassower, are you telling me with all the negative tone on yen carry, the only yen carry that's busted is Brazil?
You have 50% policy rates in Turkey. You have 10.5% policy rates in places like Brazil. So the fact that it is down on a total return basis tells you what's going on in spot there. But my point is, again, when you think about the carry trade, you got to think in terms of total return, and that interest rate component is a huge part of that. A lot of people are ignoring that. The carry trade is coming back on. I think, in fact, Nomura just, Japan's biggest brokerage just said the activity was, robust to say the least this week. So people are putting back on yen shorts.
Okay, we had to do that. It's in his agreement, folks. Page 4, paragraph 3. We
like my yen shorts.
Damian Sassower, full yen short carry trade chit chat. We got to get that cleared by 8:00. And here at 7:13 Wall Street time, we have checked the box on paragraph 4. Page 3. Futures at -8, down futures at -32. There's some economic data today. It's not a normal Friday. There's actually some serious housing data coming up later today. The 10-year real yield, Mr. Sassower mentioned that, 1.7490. I want to call that elevated after the last number of days. Futures, -7. On YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures right now, well, we're in the red. This despite growing optimism that the U.S. will avoid a recession. We have NASDAQ futures, little change, down about 6 points. Dow futures down about 31 points. S&P futures down about 6 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.87%, and that's down 4 basis points. Europe Stock 600 index headed for its best week since May. Right now, the Stock 600 up about 0.2%. We take you to Germany, where shares of Bayer, they are higher, up about 13% after that court victory in its Roundup weed killer litigation. And then we have some news from grocery operator Kroger. The company says it plans to lower grocery prices by $1 billion if that merger with Albertsons is successful, and that doubles its previous commitment. We have Kroger shares little change, Albertsons up about 1%. And just when you thought Paramount Global drama was over, a new bidder has reportedly stepped into the picture. Sources tell Bloomberg Secret Mayor Edgar Bronfman Jr. reportedly considering making an offer for National Amusements as well as an investment in Paramount itself. Paramount shares, though, are little changed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Research note out. This is important, particularly for the tri-state area. Torsten Slock, Apollo Management, he does some analysis of CMBS loan delinquency. Ooh. Here's the sentence: too early to buy distressed commercial real estate. That from Torsten Slock moments ago. What does the Sassower clan see north of the city? I mean, is it booming?
Oh, I'll tell you, the CMBS, just in terms of securitized asset classes, is up 4.3% year to date. It's a better performer than fixed rate MBS, than ABS. It's still hanging in there, and it's not that far off from the 8.1% odd that U.S. high yield corporate debt is up year to date. So it's one of the best performers out there. So, look, I mean, depending upon who you ask, it's still an attractive asset class.
2 days ago, in my head, I said, wow, is it time to talk to Kona Hake? Brockton nailed it. We have Kona Hake with us now. I just can't say enough about her work here. Kona, I want to start with, and I'm doing this because of the new leadership in Thailand, a new prime minister in Thailand, very political and all that. How is rice doing? To me, globally, rice is elevated. Am I correct?
They are elevated historically, but they're down from a year ago. So that's a huge improvement, because you're right in that rice is very important. It's critical, in fact, for more than half the world's population. It's the staple commodity for food. And this time last year, Thailand had a terrible crop. India imposed an export ban. The likes of Indonesia were sucking up whatever they could, downgrading their, utilizing all of their stockpiles. So there was a complete crisis. But thankfully, there's been an improvement both in India and Thailand, so crops are looking a bit better now,
So from the spring, from May, I have the Bloomberg Commodity Index, really pretty decisive within the industry, folks. It's an elegant index, down 11%. How do you link your world of disinflation to the call of global disinflation in general?
It's been a huge component, I would say. The grains, corn, wheat, soybeans, that basket, which I traded on Chicago, those are now at 4-year lows. So we're now at prices before Ukraine was invaded. And that's thanks to bumper harvests. Straight after the prices rallied after the 2022 invasion, you saw big responses in Brazil. Farmers planted a lot more. Right. And now in the US Midwest, they're about to reap a fantastic harvest with record yields. So we're seeing plentiful harvests around the world.
From the Putin invasion, spring of 2002, 2 years and a bit ago, corn down 54%.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Kona, I need to ask you about this shifting narrative from inflation to growth concerns here. For me, as an emerging market practitioner, that means what I have to look at for confirmation that growth is slowing globally, it's going to be commodity prices for me. And I'm looking at iron ore here, back to 2022 lows. I'm looking at China's steel crisis. Talk to us about what's going on in China and the impact on global growth.
So there's as distinct as can be from the agricultural commodities, clearly. I think the iron ore, the metals, the industrial commodities, as it were, that basket is really suffering. And it's because of China. China is just, we all know it's very well flagged. The real estate is having a massive issue in China. Property development, the whole sector is in issues. So I think now you're seeing a problem with the steel mills. They're just not needing any more throughput because there's no demand. Inventories are shockingly high, which means demand for iron ore.
So is that right? I mean, just to cut you off there, so you're seeing steel inventories, copper inventory, metal inventories are high, and they're going to be dumping that on the broader market. Is that certainly a theme that you're playing?
We're already seeing that. Yep. Correct.
Yep. I mean, Tom, this is exactly what I'm seeing as well. I mean, this is the shifting narrative from inflation to growth.
And I'll get it out on Twitter and LinkedIn. I did it a week ago, but my read of the summer so far is a fabulous article talking about what Mr. Sassower alludes to with China in gross oversupply. I'll put that article out here in the next 10, 15 minutes. Conan, let's get back to the softs, your wheelhouse as well. The circle of the Mediterranean wrapped around a war which I don't know where the border is in Ukraine this morning, or in Gaza. Tell us about the softs within the arc of the Mediterranean to the Black Sea.
Well, the Black Sea region, if I start with that, considering it's war-torn and there were massive geopolitical tensions there and port constraints, and it was just a no-go area. I have to say, they have been remarkable, the farmers there, in terms of the wheat and the grains output they've seen. They've also had not ideal weather. Russia certainly didn't have great weather, but Ukraine has managed to pull out all the stops, and they've harvested decent crops, and they've actually managed to get it through, initially through rail, but now also through the ports. So that's been a great savior to the world supply.
Right.
When you get closer to the Mediterranean, we've all been hearing about record temperatures. So Spain has been very dry in certain parts, and that's led to olive oil prices up until a year ago reaching record highs.
An outrage, Kona. We had surveillance olive oil correspondent Javier Blas on yesterday. He can't contain his fury over what Spanish olive oil done. Kona, very quickly here, do you place the commodity disinflation is into 2025, or can there be a stability or even reversal?
I think you have to group them. I think for softs, we're stabilizing. I can't see it go too much lower because we're at pretty much rock bottom now. It's hitting cost of production and upgrade that way. I think for metals and industrials, I think there's potentially lower to go only because with the potentially U.S. tariffs, and China will not want to be buying it from the U.S., so those Chicago futures might fall. Energy could go higher. I really think energy could go higher.
Kona Haig, thank you for the brief. Greatly appreciate that, particularly comments on the Mediterranean. And thank you, Javier Blas, for his wisdom yesterday. So we're on air, and I hear this, Lisa, and then I get the faint aroma of Damian Sassower's baked barbecue-flavored chips, 65% less fat.
Only 3.5 grams of total fat, one serving. I mean, it's unbelievable. 140 calories, no cholesterol.
Are these a Cheez-Its jalapeno? I mean,
so delicious.
I'm still getting. A guy on the street stopped me yesterday over Amanda Lynham at BlackRock talking jalapeno. Are these healthy? Are these good and good for you?
This is why Mars says baked doesn't mean it's healthy.
This is why Mars is going into the snack food business, right? Because of guys like me who are addicted to baked Lays. I mean, there's a real market for guys like me. We need to be served.
For breakfast? Damian.
It's only breakfast if you're on New York time. I've been here for quite a few hours already.
Pretty soon we'll have chocolate-covered Cheez-Its. That's what he's going to pay you with the Mars.
That sounds like an idea for Mars, actually.
I'm telling you.
I can see it. We thank you earlier this week. Huge response to what we did with Cheez-Its. And, of course, that is a near $30 billion transaction, including $6 billion of debt picked up. Damian, I'm sorry, it's a harbinger for M&A, given the good feeling and the way corporations are adapting.
Well, I still think the consumer has some, there's still a runway for the consumer to continue consuming, certainly here in the U.S., and I think that's what we're looking at.
We will have to see. Churn to the market right now. It's a Friday churn, but the VIX, wow. Where are you at 21?
Wow.
The VIX, a bull market, 15.43. We are on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out there. Humbled by the growth. Good morning, good evening, I should say, across the Pacific Rim. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures. This is despite the latest inflation data prompting traders to kind of dial back those bets for a jumbo rate cut in September. Now, a 25 basis point reduction by the Fed, that remains fully priced, with more than 90 basis points of easing expected by the end of 2024. So we have NASDAQ futures down about 9 points, Dow futures down 34, S&P futures down about 7. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.87%, and that's down 4 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,468 an ounce. Brent crude $79 a barrel. WTI crude $75 a barrel. More economic data on tap for today. We have housing starts, building permits, 8:30 Wall Street time, and then at 10 a.m. Wall Street time, we'll get a read on sentiment. Citibank, they're being in the spotlight this morning, being sued by the U.S. for allegedly shortchanging its bankers, failing to pay them properly for meal, rest breaks, pre-shift work. Citi shares are little changed. And Nexstar Media, they're taking a hit after a New York appellate court ruled that the company intentionally withheld information from DirecTV during negotiations on a new broadcasting agreement. Nexstar is up about 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thank you so much. I think it's going to be a restful weekend. Maybe not for the two presidential candidates, the vice presidential candidates, but maybe we can stagger to Monday. Jeanette Lowe joins now with Strategist, the Director of Policy Research. Jeanette, the single sentence at the bottom of your research notes says it all. And that there's all this certitude going on about OMG to the left, OMG to the right. And the answer is we're all American, and we're going to have a divided government January of 2025. Is that your call?
Yes, I mean, I think we have quite a bit of the election still to go. But if you just look at the map right now, what we're thinking is that still there's a high probability that you could have a divided government scenario. So when Biden was still the candidate, you saw a significant momentum for Trump, and you saw increasing odds of a Republican sweep in this election. We had the odds in the betting markets as high as 55% a month ago. And you're now starting to see more concern, maybe more questions about whether or not we could have a Democratic sweep. But I think if you really look at what's happening right now, we're seeing a lot of momentum for Kamala Harris. That helps with down ballot races. Democrats only need a net 4 seats to take over the House, which means they could do that with seats in California and New York. And then on the Republican side for the Senate, they are more likely to take over the Senate because Senator Manchin's not running in West Virginia. And right now you have Tim Sheehy ahead in Montana. So right now it does kind of look like a divided government scenario might be most likely.
For the two candidates, if they see a divided government, do they run wider, more right, more left, more progressive, more MAGA? Or do the two candidates run to the middle like Reagan and Clinton?
Well, so I think both candidates really want a sweep, of course, because they want to be able to enact their agenda. So I think the Republicans see that Senate map and are particularly hopeful that they could have the sweep in November. Harris obviously is coming out with some of her economic plan today. So I think that, you know, she has a possibility that she could move to the center. But I think right now what you're seeing is she's still having a lot of her typical progressive tendencies. She's going to be pushing out more things about going after affordability issues, particularly with regard to housing and food prices and prescription drugs. So I don't necessarily see we're going to have a ton of movement towards the center at this point in the race.
Jeanette, I'm so happy you're talking about Kamala Harris's economic agenda here. I mean, we see her proposing to offer as much as $25,000 for first-time homeowners, no taxes on tips. I mean, $10,000 tax credits here, there, and everywhere. Where's all this money going to come from? I mean, are we going to get any color whatsoever on what her tax policies are for not just corporates, but households as well?
Yeah, so we'll see. Obviously, you know, we have the convention coming up next week. This is just kind of her first laying out. She might mention taxes. We'll see how that goes. There might be more policy proposals rolled out next week in Chicago. But I think that overall, we're at least looking at it is that she's going to be relatively in line with what the Biden administration's tax plan is, which is no tax increases on those making less than $400,000, and probably proposing increases on corporate rates and on high-income individuals. The big problem, though, of course, is that we do have a tough U.S. fiscal situation. So any of these proposals that she's offering, it's going to be difficult to find the money, particularly in a divided government scenario, to get them enacted.
Jeanette, you've seen Donald Trump struggle to attack Kamala Harris's character. And I'm curious, do you see that continuing? Is there anything that the Republicans or that Donald Trump could be doing differently? I mean, how is he going to, attack Kamala Harris? And broadly speaking, how is he going to kind of elevate himself in the polls back to levels we saw, just a few months back?
Right. I mean, I think the biggest thing about this race that's changed over the past month is before, when Biden was the candidate, this was a referendum on the Biden administration, and Trump was winning that race. Kamala Harris getting into the race has now made this a choice election between her or Trump. And now what Trump really needs to do is he needs to turn it back into a referendum. He needs to tie Kamala Harris to the Biden administration and really focus on things like inflation and the economy and immigration. If he could do that, that's where he has an advantage. Right. But I think that's determined to be seen if that's where he's going to go or if he's going to try to keep making some of these other comments.
You brought it up to that point then. Can the former president listen to his advisors? That's in the zeitgeist this weekend inside your beltway, Jeanette Lowe. Is there any idea here that the former President Trump, can adapt and adjust to policy discussions away from the way he's going after the vice president?
I mean, so I think he tried to do that somewhat yesterday, kind of focusing on economic policy a little bit, trying to show that divide between what he did as president and what Kamala Harris is proposing and what we've seen under the Biden administration. But then he does have a tendency to also go off script and go off the talking points. So we'll have to see how much he's able to make that case that there's a difference between how he would run the economy versus Kamala Harris, and whether or not he can kind of stick to that message discipline.
Thanks for the brief. Jeanette Lowe with us with Strategist. A look at the politics of the moment into the weekend. Program note, Margaret Brennan to join at the top of the, I believe, 9 o'clock hour. Of course, Face the Nation. You can see that at 10 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio. Hear it, rather, on 10 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio and selected geographies as well. The calendar's out. I mean, the basic stress in this room, Damian, you haven't been here. We need to get an update right now. I mean, we're rolling into the newspaper segment here. Lisa's fully prepared. Lisa, the haircut trauma now is just unbelievable. We executed a haircut yesterday.
And how much did it cost you?
It's on a need-to-know basis, and I don't know.
Tom hasn't paid for a haircut since '84.
But we're like, it's all of a sudden this is the weekend where it's like, how's your summer reading?
Yeah.
Did you do your math packet?
Oh, I was on that yesterday. The summer reading, very behind on the summer reading. But I'm glad they still enforce it, though, some of the schools, because some don't.
Did your offspring survive freshman year? Are they actually going to matriculate into that soft year?
Tom, we just sent our oldest back to University of Miami for his sophomore year. He left yesterday, and I got one daughter back from sleepaway camp over the weekend. I have another coming back this weekend, and then, Tom, off to Fire Island next week. So I'll be listening to you from the beach, from the South Shore of Long Island, as you dissect markets and tell us what's going on with the litmus paper.
I'm going to be in Wyoming.
Oh, you are? Oh, that's right, Jackson Hole.
We're going out, and I think it's. I'll be honest, folks. I looked at it
Chair Powell
2-3 weeks ago. And I'm like, yeah, okay, $1 million cowboy bar, lots of giggles, and all of a sudden, you wonder what he's going to do. I was there when he did the famous 9-minute speech.
Yeah.
And
they're not going to let him talk this time around. Economic outlook. What does that mean? Market functioning. What is it? The financial structure of markets.
You know how I feel about this.
I know.
I mean, I don't believe in the parlor game. I thought we had some great conversation this week about it. Do you believe, Damian, from where you sit, that we're looking at real GDP and real interest rates now, away from the Fed parlor game of this, that, and the other thing?
Yeah, I think they're trying to shift the narrative to one of growth to the labor force, and I think they're going to be successful in doing that. I think you're going to see more evidence of that at the Jackson Hole, but I don't really expect them to signal, the level or the amount or anything that they're going to do in September. Right. I mean, they may go 0, but I don't think they will. But 50, I don't think so.
I'll do a retweet out. A major shout out to the gentleman driving basic economic education at Harvard University, Jason Furman. Has an inflation measure, which is an ecumenical set of 21 series. And he does some fancy weighting to it to make it statistically solid, if you will. And it irrevocably shows disinflation in place. I'll get that out. He's been a huge value add out on Twitter with that.
Well, I'll tell you this. 9 of the 17 major developed and emerging market central banks have eased policy rates over the last month. New Zealand, a surprise 25 bip cut to 5.25 on Wednesday. The Philippines cut 25 bips on Thursday. I did not know that. Yes, they did. And next week, we're probably going to see Sweden do a 25 bip cut. And so, we'll see. I mean, we also have South Korea, Thailand, Indo, and Turkey next week, but it's really going to be about Sweden. And we see that in the dollar vacillating. I'll put it rounded up to 103 at DXY. Yeah. The yen 148 into a Friday is germane. That is a weaker yen over the last number of days. Sterling rebounds again, 129.04. Tots play on Monday. Ooh. Leicester. There's a lot of cricket, I've been told, this weekend. A lot of South African. There's rugby also. I think South Africa's playing Australia this weekend in rugby. Killing me. Springbok, baby. Much. Come on. It's just, you got to get remember the horn at the Olympics? The South Africans had the horn thing.
Vuvuzelas.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. Fantasy. Flag football's coming to the Olympics.
It is. I saw that.
I mean, that's real big stuff. And ladies as well as men. So it's going to be really interesting. Lisa Mateo. Just shortlisted for flag football. Red and green on the screen with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. Some of Donald Trump's Republican supporters have begged him to focus on policy and stop hurling insults at his opponent, Kamala Harris. Yesterday, the former president made it clear that he is not going to change. Trump spoke at a news conference in Bedminster, New Jersey, and slammed Harris.
I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president. And I think it's very important that we win. And whether the personal attacks are good, bad, I mean, she certainly attacks me personally. She actually called me weird. He's weird.
Meanwhile, Vice President Harris will give voters a better idea of her economic policy during a speech later today in North Carolina. Yesterday, Harris and President Biden announced the administration was able to lower the cost of 10 medications for Americans on Medicare. Biden also spoke about Harris.
I have an incredible partner. The progress we've made, she's going to make one hell of a president.
The Medicare plan, which takes effect in January of 2026, will make the drugs treating everything from heart failure and arthritis to diabetes more affordable and is expected to save enrollees $1.5 billion and taxpayers $6 billion. International mediators are holding a second day of negotiations with Israel to pause the war with Hamas in Gaza. Some families of hostages held in Gaza believe the latest round of ceasefire talks could be the last best chance to set their loved ones free. Hurricane Ernesto is making its way toward Bermuda. In Puerto Rico, residents are still cleaning up from the storm's impact. More than 300,000 customers remain without power, and some parts of the island on the west coast remain flooded. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
In your youth, there were certain symbols along the driving of parents in unair-conditioned cars with, when are we going to get there? And one of the places where you just stopped and weren't a brat was you would look out on a field in the distance as you drove by Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and you would say, I just wish I could once play there. Tigers, Yankees.
That's right, Michael Barr.
Little League baseball game. I'm sorry, it's better than Field of Dreams.
I wish I could go there. I wish I had the time to do it, just to say, hey, I want to see these guys play. And of course,
7 p.m.
By these guys, you're talking about Soto and Judge, right?
Yeah.
Murder's Row, Garrett Ruth. No, I mean we've got a guy named Garrett Cole on the mound against the Tigers tonight. So we'll see how that one goes. But the first of a 3-game series, and then next week, Tom Keene, number 1 team in baseball, the Cleveland Guardians against the New York Yankees. Cleveland Guardians are in town in the Bronx. Get ready.
Do you agree with me that it's getting fun earlier because of the wild card and all?
Absolutely.
This is sort of almost first week of September tension, 2 weeks early.
Yeah, it's about this time.
The Yankee season reminds me of the unwind of the yen carry trade, and here's why. The Yankees were great out of the gates, top performing. Carry was the top performing strategy, and then obviously
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures pretty much treading water despite the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ both on course for their biggest weekly advance since November. We have NASDAQ futures down about 6 points, Dow futures down 20, S&P futures down about 7. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.87%, that's down 4 basis points. What's also down, shares of Rivian lower, 0.3% lower. The company's paused production of the electric commercial van that it makes for Amazon, and that's due to a part shortage. And we have some chip tension. China's AMEC suing the Pentagon to try and get off a blacklist that bars it from doing business with U.S. firms. And then we'll leave you over to housing. New York City, well, it's approved a plan to allocate $500 million to rezone parts of the Bronx to build thousands of new homes. The city's been struggling with housing shortage, so hopefully that can help out. This is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Surveillance apology here. I don't know if you know this. When Damian got cut off there a couple minutes ago, that was my fault. I have down below here, you can't see it on YouTube here, there's a red button that says Red Sox Nation. And if there's too much Yankees enthusiasm, it's out of control. My right foot hits that button, Damian. And did
you, by the way, see the Celtics? They're going to hand out their NBA championship rings next year in October, the day they're facing the Knicks.
That'd be good. The Knicks is
come on, man. I mean, what is it with you Boston guys?
I'm going to have to do some Knicks basketball talk here. Get prepared and all. I mean, they look
Jalen
good.
Brunson, baby.
We'll have to see. I mean, it's going to be interesting to say the least. I've got red on the screen. Futures, -7.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages of Lisa Mateo Hour. Brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. There are no ticket charges. There are no conflicts of your interest at ibkr.com/RIA. One more time, ibkr.com/RIA. Lisa, Friday. What do you got?
We're starting off with a scandal in the world of elite high school math. So this will interest you, Tom. The American Mathematics Competition, you know about it. Students spend years preparing for it.
Yeah.
Attracts attention, top colleges, finance industry recruiters. Been around for 74 years. But the Wall Street Journal is saying there's been online leaks of the test, and it's gotten out. They were available online hours, days before students sat down for the test. Some were free, some had a charge of like a few $100s. But kids heard about it, the leak on TikTok. Parents, math coaches, they're all up in arms. They want the content, administrators to do something. And they did, they did disqualify some students. But it just goes to show you technology is getting this out there.
This goes to this theme in America of the dumbing of America. Major shout out, Jeff Sachs of Columbia, way out front with the discussion of the dumbing down of America. And it forgets Damian Sassower in upper decile. They're doing math in high school, Damian, you and I dreamed of junior year in college.
Well, you know the type of companies that support the AMC, the competition, Citadel, Hudson River Trading, big high-frequency trading firms and hedge funds who are obviously quantitative in focus. Isn't that right, Lisa?
Yeah, no, most definitely. And they do, because these are the top of the top. I mean, they go to the math Olympiads. They go internationally to compete with this.
Right.
This is the top.
And a guest of ours, honored to have Wei Leon from BlackRock, she won not 1 year, but 2 year.
Really?
The Chinese equivalent award in China. That was her ticket to Cambridge, I believe it was. Yeah. But what I would emphasize, folks, is this delusion of the dumbing of America completely ignores an upper decile that's just killing it.
Well, Lisa, I'll tell you one thing Cambridge probably doesn't have: sorority houses with blow-dry bars and crystal chandeliers. Isn't that right?
And where are you having that? Miami?
It is happening. Blow-dry bars. You sit down. That's what it is. And they blow-dry your hair. These are big-time sorority houses, multi-million-dollar makeovers. Crystal chandeliers, okay? Craft rooms so they can make their banners, dining halls, study rooms with video conferencing. I mean, we're talking mega mansions.
$15 million per house. I mean, incredible.
Wait, are we talking Tridelt or Chi Omega?
Delta Zeta and Tridel. Yes,
Tridel. Why did I know that?
How did you know?
You have no idea my history with
Tridel.
Oh
boy, we want to know.
At least 6 or 7. Good morning. But it was all at the secret. Whatever stays at the sink in Boulder, Colorado, stays at whatever the phrase
That's
is.
an offline combo.
The
I like that.
The Tridelts.
The Tridelts. A $15 million renovation. University of Arkansas. That's what they have there. University of Alabama. That's Delta Zeta. $17 million. 40,000 square feet. But the thing is, they need to attract members, right? You look at the Wall Street Journal article, the pictures are amazing of some of these places.
Yeah.
I mean, these girls are all over social media filming, everything to try and get more people. What I didn't realize is that they start recruiting them right out of high school.
It's so different, and this goes to the polarity into this academic season of in England, in France, across continental Europe, they're saying, we don't do that.
I wonder what your sorority dues are now as a parent at University of Alabama if your daughter's going to try to. I mean, I'm just curious because, I'm not quite there yet, but I imagine at some point I will be. So.
Yes, and that's the one thing the article does not say. I kept looking. I'm like, well, how much does it cost for a kid to go there? But it doesn't
It's not
say.
costing the kids this year. It's costing the parents
the
next
parents,
year.
This conversation was Kappa Kappa Gamma free, KKG. Next.
Space travel. That's where we're going to. SpaceX are going to launch a methane detecting satellite. It's going to track those super polluters. So it's part of a nonprofit, Carbon Mapper. It's the Tanager 1 satellite. So it's about the size of a mini fridge. And basically it goes off and it'll look at companies like oil and gas wells, livestock operations. You've heard about the cows. This is happening today. Full disclosure, though, Carbon Mapper Coalition, it has received funding from Bloomberg Philanthropies. But it's happening today, and they're going to make that data available in the coming months. And it's really going to show where those big movers are, like
China.
I
mean, do we need a new satellite to tell us that China is a major polluter?
We have Javier Blas. Thank you so much. Really on a tight schedule. Javier Blas from London yesterday on coal. And it's just the partition between China and India and OECD on coal alone is just absolutely stunning. Next.
And the food value wars, I will end you with this. They are heating up again. Subway getting into the competition, okay? So if you like your sandwiches, this is a source from the New York Post. They're saying that they're going to put out this promotion. Okay, remember the $5 hot dog, foot long? Well, that's long gone. Inflation's happened. So now it's $6.99. So that's what they want to do.
$6.99
which
for a
is
foot
still
long?
a good price for a foot long,
Pretty
considering that, some of them are like $10. So they're going to make it starting August 26th. You can get the foot long, and it's not just going to be one like how they did a lot of times. It's going to be a different one, for different weeks and for different days.
And this is worldwide, across the whole country, not just New York?
Yes, they tried it out in LA.
Awesome.
They made it $7.99. That was a little still too pricey. So they're dropping it $1. They're making it $6.99.
I got back-to-back emails. We're doing hot dogs later on. Walter's Dogs Mamaroneck, 105th anniversary. And Nathan Hager and Lucas Shaw both sent in. They said, forget about Michael Barr. Forget about Damian Sassower up near Mamaroneck. They said, Dodger Dog. Dodger Dog is the most popular hot dog in Major League Baseball. Out at Chevis.
More than a Fendor?
Yeah.
Fendor.
Haley Koufax. She was one of my interns. Haley Koufax from L.A. Her record is 4 Dodger Dogs across a 10-inning game.
Wow.
And
how big are they?
They're bigger. Yeah, they're like a Subway thing. They're long. That's their whole thing.
You mentioned Walter's Hot Dogs. We're going to have the food truck come out here to 731 Lexington in Midtown and just park right in front.
We're going to lean on you today. Oh. I mean, between you and Eric Weiner and Damian Sassower, we're going to get the full treatment on Walter's Dogs.
That's right.
I've never had one.
Oh, I mean, it's unbelievable. And, look, the reality is they split their dogs, and that's just the way to go. If you're going to grill a hot dog, you got to split it. You got to get inside there.
Well, you would know, Damian. Fort Lee, New Jersey. There's Hiram's.
Hiram's and Callahan's. Hiram's is an institution where I live. Thank you very much.
All the time.
Rams. I mean, Callahan's and Hiram's right on Lemoyne Avenue. I grew up eating at both those places, but the real place in New Jersey, Bergen County fans, White Manna, Hackensack, the best burger you're ever going to have. White Manna.
Never heard
Speaking of Tridelts, Zweigel's hot dogs were so popular at my frat house in Boulder, Colorado. This is a few years ago. They would beg me to bring out Zweigel red and white hots to Boulder for the parties with the Tridelts. It is a sadness, one of the joys of the 80s. Greg King with Alzheimer's. Greg King has left us. Here's his classic, the breakup song.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in a fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, D. Sassower in for Mr. Sweeney. Today, we had a terse note out on YouTube. Sweeney, he's been off 53 of the last 52 Fridays. Well, let me explain. If you have Paul Sweeney's life, you want to be off on Friday. Right. Are you golfing today?
I'm not going to be golfing today, but I know Paul probably will be. I mean, the problem with Friday golf is, look, it gets very crowded at the club. You know, I like to take Fridays off. That's why I'm here. I really enjoy spending time with you, Tom. And, you know, look, I mean, I only try to play once on the weekends. I like to spend time with my wife, you know, getting to know her and my kids.
Whoa. 36 holes or 18 holes?
36, Tom, obviously. Maybe 27, you know.
We welcome all of you on a Friday. We've got a really important interview coming up. Katy Kaminski here on the equity markets for Global Wall Street. This is our interview of the day on what we've witnessed over the last 10 or even 12 days. Red on the screen, it's fractional. The VIX stunning. 15.44. The real yield, Damian led with that earlier, 1.76%. From the Interactive Broker Studios of Bloomberg Business Flash, you need it. Lisa Mateo.
You got it. Little movement in futures, and this is despite the latest U.S. data showed evidence of economic strength. Today, we'll get some more data. We have a look at the housing market, housing starts, building permits, as well as a read on sentiment. So we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 23 points. Dow futures, little change, down 36 points. S&P futures down about 0.1%, 8 points. The 2-year yield, 4.03%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.87%, down 4 basis points. In Asia, stocks headed for their best weekly performance in over a year. Right now, we'll take a look at the Nikkei, up about 3.5%. The Japanese yen set for its sharpest weekly drop since May. The yen at 148.03 against the dollar. Now, meanwhile, the popular yen-centered carry trade making a comeback. Nomura Holdings says it's attracting corporate clients and hedge funds again. We'll head over to shares of Texas Instruments. They're up about 1%. The Biden administration announced the company set to receive a $1.6 billion in CHIP Act grants, and also on top of that, $3 billion in loans. And shares of the largest U.S. maker of chip manufacturing equipment, we're talking about Applied Materials, they are lower, down 2% after its sales forecast disappointed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Okay, we're going to have a major grown-up talk here. There's going to be a little jargon involved here. Damian Sassower and Tom Keene. And joining us, Katy Kaminski, AlphaSimplex Chief Research Strategist, barely describes the academic and quantitative finance abilities here. Katie, you are trend-based. I'm trend-based. Dean Kernet is trend-based. Bruno DePure, the giant of quant at Bloomberg and Ito's Dilemma, he's trend-based. Was the trend shattered over what we saw 10 days ago?
Yes, I have to admit, it's been a really tough environment for trend, because if you look at, let me just make one point here. The 50-day moving average for the S&P has recovered in the last 6 days to be only 2% down. I mean, we basically went from everything's going wrong back to, well, I guess it's okay. And so the world is just, from a trend perspective, shifted significantly. And some of the new trends that we're seeing, they're weak, right, but they're very different.
I'm going to go to August 6th, and folks, this involves Wells Waldo, parabolic SAR, all sorts of fancy things, a thing called ADX DMI. Kaminski got an A+ on the exam. I got a C-. She ruined the curve. Katie, I'm looking at a lot of fancy quant technicals, and what I saw is a jump condition. How do you get back on trend after a jump condition?
Well, this is a good question, because what happens when you have such a big move is it adjusts trend signals a lot. So you have to think a little bit about the type of trend filter that you're using. Some models are going to be much more like your classic moving averages, and those really adjust aggressively when you have that type of move. But you can also use other types of models that may sort of Windsorize or remove some of the outliers, and those may not be as much affected. But the truth is there may be information in this recent event that could be foreboding for potential trends to come.
Katie, let's Windsorize together. You're talking 200-day moving average. I'd like to focus your attention on credit spreads, specifically sovereign credit default swap spreads, 5-year. 15 of the 25 riskiest issuers, their spreads are below their 200-day moving averages. Spreads barely moved in the recent sell-off. Talk to us about the signals you're taking away from the credit market.
So the challenge with the credit market is not everything falls in one particular drop. And I think what I'm thinking about for credit is if you think about past crisis periods or other recessionary periods, it doesn't hit all markets at the same time. So I'm concerned that this recent event could just be a little bit of a warning signal that, things are not necessarily going to be as soft as we would have liked, and that we could see a more of a recessionary trade in the fall if we see more weaker data.
And we know the correlation between rising volatility and the unwind of carry leverage trades, for that matter. Talk to us a little bit about what we've seen in just the last 48 hours. I mean, vol is back down below 16. I mean, carry is coming back. I mean, talk to us about what you envisage as we head through the end of the summer, and which is still quite illiquid.
Yes, I mean, I think trading volumes tend to always be low in August. And if you look at what's happened, what's surprising to me, the market's acting like, well, that happened, but we're back to normal. And I really think that people are focused on the fact that they think now they're going to get cuts, and that's going to get us through any potential economic weakness. So I think it's surprising how fast market sentiment shifts, and people go from being terrified to, everything's fine.
Do you think there was carnage out there? Are we going to get reports in 90 days? I mean, what was the leverage placed that creates upset given the moves we saw? Was there a lot of leverage out there?
I think there was. I mean, if you look at positioning, and the CFTC and the futures markets for sure had massive volumes on those sell-off days. So I think it's more the relative value trades that are the bigger challenge, because those tend to have a lot more leverage. So that's why carry, for example, has been in the focus. Yeah. I'd say that for trend, I mean, it was difficult, but the leverage wasn't that high.
Damian, on a side note here, I'm having real trouble with the resurgence of option writing as a free lunch.
Yes, no.
It's killing me. Well, look, I'm doing everything I can on air not to tear it to shreds.
Well, and I'm doing everything I can to avoid the carry trade, but, Katie, in this case, I really can't, because real yield differentials are higher in 30 out of 40, major developed and emerging market economies over the last year. And you've got countries like Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, and India, which still have, 3%, real yields, 2-year real yields that's after inflation. I mean, come on. I mean, rate differentials are still wide. Investors are still going to be attracted to the carry trade, especially when you've got real yields in Japan at negative 2.5% still. So talk to us a little bit about, what you're seeing in the markets. Can you see people putting leveraged positions back on as we get into the end of this year?
I mean, I think you will see that. I definitely think that people got spooked by what happened, but as you noted, there's just so much divergence across the market, so there's opportunity to be had, and when there's that type of dislocation, it generates interest.
What does the real yield technicals tell you?
Well, right now, when we're looking at fixed income, the biggest thing that I would say is that we are seeing very, very strong technical signals in fixed income. It's the one asset class that made sort of a seismic shift this summer. Yeah. We've been short fixed income for so long, and now there seems to be a steady view that rates are going down. I think that's something.
Yeah, for mere mortals, Katie, what you're basically saying is your technicals are price up, yield lower.
Exactly.
Okay. Katy Kaminski, I think we'll leave it there. She's not talking. It's a Friday. It's a Friday, Katy Kaminski.
I've got a great chart. I'm going to put it on LinkedIn for all you listeners out there about real yields across developed and emerging markets, the change versus a year ago. It's going to blow your mind. I'm putting it out right now.
He's like this, Michael, on Saturdays.
No, he's like this on Tuesdays when we're taping also.
Katy Kaminski, thank you so much. I can see him doing the yen carry trade, Bloomberg Business of Sports. Red on the screen, a little bit fractional. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris will give voters a better idea of her economic policy during a speech later today in North Carolina. Bloomberg's Amy Morris has a preview from Washington.
The Harris campaign is zeroing in on high food prices as inflation remains a big issue in the presidential race. And she's expected to push for a federal ban on price gouging on groceries. Harris is putting particular emphasis on rising meat prices, which she says account for a large part of rising grocery bills. Harris says she would aim to enact the ban within her first 100 days, in part by directing the Federal Trade Commission to impose harsh penalties on any firms that break new limits on price gouging. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The Harris campaign says the vice president will also propose a benefit for first-time home buyers up to $25,000 in down payment support. That builds on a proposal from President Biden in his State of the Union address for a $10,000 tax credit for first-time buyers. You can hear the vice president's comments live at 2:45 p.m. on Bloomberg Radio and television. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump gave a news conference at his New Jersey golf club. Trump says he is entitled to personal attacks against Harris, adding, "I don't have a lot of respect for her."
Kamala Harris is the candidate of the forces who want to destroy Western civilization, but most particularly Israel and Jewish people.
And the vice presidential debate is set for October. Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance have both agreed to face off on October 1st. International diplomacy to prevent the war in Gaza from spreading into a wider regional conflict is intensifying. The British and French foreign ministers are making a joint trip to Israel today to push for peace. Meanwhile, internationally mediated ceasefire talks in Qatar were expected to enter their second day. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Into the weekend. Let's discuss this. This is the theme. Lisa, jump in here with this as well. I'm looking at a lot of really smart people on why beef is so expensive. And it's a combination of drought, but particularly the herd has come in. And here's the major message. We haven't stopped eating beef. The only one from sea to shining sea who's beefless is Lisa Mateo. No one else is. Everybody else is chowing down the latest T-bone. I mean, there's fewer cows. That's why beef's up.
Well, I mean, I try to eat a limited amount of beef because of my cholesterol levels, too much red meat, by the way, you hear about this, I forget what it's called when your toes hurt. I have friends now.
We call this gout.
That's what it's called. When you eat too much red meat, this gout thing is real. I have friends now, their toes hurt, like they can't walk. It's a real big thing. Steve Aaron Fried calling you out.
Was a pescatarian until I had a birthday celebration at Sylvia's, which ruined me because this beautiful woman brought out fried chicken and ribs, and I'm like, you know what?
And you went to town.
It was.
And you know what? Michael got 3 stitches in his chin because Mrs. Keene elbowed him out of the way as well. Unfortunately, I know too much about gout. Listen carefully. Gout is totally fixable. Okay. It's one of the few things out there. The Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, lots of other places have beautiful websites in English. I turned it around literally in 2 weeks, and I'm on it every day as a routine thumb. You can drink water, milk, coffee, tart cranberry juice, and martinis. That's the list.
For all you listeners out there, at Tom Keene on X for any of your gout-related questions. At Tom Keene
it's fixable.
With an E.
People that say you can't, my feet hurt. Yeah, they do. There's a science to it. And the great news is, with a lot of good help from smart people, you can fix it. Don't be pessimistic about gout. It'll ruin your game. You'll get down to your game will go over an 80 if you watch it. Red and green red on the screen rather. Futures at -12. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are falling, this despite growing optimism that the U.S. will avoid a recession. Now, more Fed speak could be the reason for that. The Fed's Austin Goolsbee told National Public Radio today that the labor market and some leading indicators on the economy are flashing warning signs, adding that their concerns unemployment will continue to rise. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.2%, 54 points. Dow futures down 33 points. S&P futures down 0.2%, or 13 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.88%, and that's down 3 basis points. Europe Stock 600 index headed for its best week since May. Right now, it's up about 0.1%. In Germany, shares of Bayer, they're higher, up 13% after that court victory in its Roundup weed killer litigation. And then we have news from grocery operator Kroger. The company plans to lower grocery prices by $1 billion if that merger with Albertsons is successful, and that doubles its previous commitment. We have Kroger shares are little changed. And a new bidder could be emerging for Paramount Global. Sources tell Bloomberg Seagram heir Edgar Bronfman Jr. considering making an offer. Paramount shares little changed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. There is a scene in The Devil Wears Prada where Meryl Streep lectures America on how nuts we are in our aspirations. Those aspirations do happen late in the summer. People tune up for the fall. Think about what's forward. Someone like Lisa Mateo says, I can spend 3 figures on a haircut for my daughter and the rest. Oliver Chen is expert at this. He's the one guy I know among many people in retail who's just tried to figure out what we want to buy, what we need to buy, and what we have to have. Oliver Chen is at TD Cowen and joins us right now. Oliver, I think the malarkey about China is just that. The Chinese, as the Wall Street Journal wrote up, are not dumb. They're going to Japan, they're doing a currency flip, and they're saving on luxury. Is luxury not as gloomy as the gloom because China's doing terrible?
Well, luxury is pretty mixed now, right, Tom? In line with what you're saying, China, we're really watching just due to the housing issues and valuation there. But you are right. The Chinese are traveling with the weaker yen, and that's happening. And Japan is seeing very strong numbers. Our main idea here is LVMH. We love Louis Vuitton still, but we're cautious. We're cautiously optimistic in what we're seeing in these trends. And the trends have slowed, unfortunately.
Well, the trends have slowed. Do they clear out? Is there a Schumpeterian creative destruction where, luxury A takes over luxury B?
Yeah, I think consolidation will continue to be a theme. However, everybody's watching the case with Michael Kors and Tapestry and the FTC. That's something to pay attention to. But consolidation, the big getting bigger, we're seeing deals also with retailers such as Neiman Marcus and Saks, and that's part of what's happening. That's part of why we do like LVMH. They spend $9 to $10 billion in advertising and promotion. Those power brands, Dior, Louis Vuitton, as well as Tiffany. Competing against that scale is certainly very difficult, and the luxury industry already is very concentrated relative to others.
Oliver, I'd love to ask you about Kith Grayson and Peter Millar, but I really need to know, what was your primary takeaway from yesterday's U.S. retail sales report?
Yeah, we're excited about a better than feared consumer. The consumer still continues to be choiceful and considered, and also look for value hacking opportunities, trading up, trading down. But we've been very bullish on Walmart. Walmart's our top idea. And Walmart foremost offers everyday low prices, a focus on value, in addition to being a tech platform and a retail ecosystem. So it offers the best of both worlds.
Well, talk to us about Walmart. For that matter, talk to us about consumer discretionary within the broader context of the S&P. I think it's one of, the underperformers this year. I think it's only up 3.5% year to date. Obviously, Amazon has a lot to do with that. But, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of consumption here in the U.S.
Yeah, we are in the midst of a consumer discretionary recession. So those trends have been very tough. What's been a brighter spot at Walmart is general merchandise was flat. That had previously been negative for about 9 quarters. So that's something we're watching. The consumer is very much impacted by inflation and feeling mixed in terms of consumer confidence. There are some brighter spots. Unemployment, it's rising, but it's at a lowish level at 4.3%. There's still dollars of savings on the sidelines. But overall, I think this choppy consumer behavior will continue, and consumers are looking for value.
You and I disagreed on this, Oliver Chen. In 5 years, where are the department stores? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's we'll see what's happening. Our idea here is Kohl's, but these department stores generate a lot of cash flow. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Macy's is working on its private label. It's also closing stores and working on small format. So we're going to see change and innovation in department stores. But overall, our top ideas are Costco, Walmart, Ulta.
Damian, Kohl's 10-year track record, -5% per year.
You know, Tom, yesterday I was at the Westchester in White Plains, the Westchester Mall. It was dead. And I'll tell you this, a lot of the stores there like Aloe and Lululemon, I mean, you're not getting a lot of foot traffic there. And quite for that matter, Oliver, let me ask you this. A lot of those stores are like, I don't know, closed down or coming soon. You know what I mean? So, I mean, do you really still see foot traffic at malls in the suburbs?
Well, foot traffic and traffic has been sluggish to negative. So it's something we're watching. People are struggling to get slightly positive traffic. So you really have to work on conversion and transactions. That's part of what's happening. It's needs versus wants. And consumers are really focused on needs and food and Costco and great value. They also still love beauty. Beauty's a great category of essentials. So you have to be very selective. We also have a younger customer problem at department stores, where department stores really need to broadcast and be appealing to Gen Z and beyond. So I think it just depends. Athletic leisure is a long-term trend. Comfort, stretch, anti-stink, you know, it's all very conducive to the future, but it's a lot of dynamicism in the sector at large.
So to be clear, Oliver Chen, into the autumn, into 2025, Walmart's your single best idea?
Yeah, Walmart's our top idea this year, and we continue to be excited. I think artificial intelligence, the marketplace model, digital advertising, plus cauliflower, thin crust pizza. You know, there's a lot happening.
I got to ask, how's Ultra Luxe doing across the nation?
We're excited about things you like Patek Philippe and Rolex. Tiffany has a great piece with Tiffany lock. And then within beauty, what's happening a lot is ultra high-end fragrances. Fragrances is a big idea, and we like Coty.
I'm afraid to ask, what is the margin on quote-unquote ultra high-end fragrances? Lisa Mateo wants to know.
Well, the cost of goods sold is very modest, like under
like what, 2 cents, right?
2%. So the margins, just like watches, can be exceptional, like 80% plus. But it's all about emotions and the innovation.
Oh,
there.
really? Thank you. We'll quote you on that. Oliver Chen, it's all about emotions. He's with Toronto Dominion Cowen, writing a beautiful work across all this. Walmart's amazing, Damian. Yeah. I gotta with the leap this week, a Hallmark leap this week, it's a 31 PE multiple.
Wow.
For people selling bananas and T-shirts.
Wow, what a move. I mean, look, for me, it's really, are we seeing that rotation from growth to value? We thought we were scratching the surface of that. I don't think so. I mean, people still pay a premium for quality. And, you know, for me, if you're trying to get defensive in this market, you know, you're not going to move into utilities or financial or property. Right. You're going to move into bonds. You're going to move into fixed income. And we're seeing that divergence, you know, between equities and fixed income for the very first time this cycle.
And now real GDP analysis, Lisa Mateo. Costco visit this weekend?
It is on tap. Yes, I do have a couple things I need.
Can you keep it under $500?
I will keep it under $500 this time. That's usually the going amount. But yes, just a few essentials.
When you line up your carts, can you see the last cart attached?
I did the double cart. Yes, I have to make extra room in the car as well. But they do have luxury perfumes at Costco.
Oh, do they?
They do.
They do?
Yes, I can get them at a lower price.
That's good to know. I'm glad we got the Kirkland perfume. Thank you. Cy, be nice. Too much. Just Kirkland perfume. I can't. I have no follow-up to that. Futures deteriorate off of sign, -16. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures lower despite the latest inflation data, prompting traders to dial back those bets for a jumbo rate cut in September. We have NASDAQ futures down about 69 points, about 0.3%. At Dow futures down 49 points. S&P futures down 16. We have the 2-year yield at 4.03%, down 6 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.87%, and that is down about 4 basis points. Companies making news: Citibank being sued in the U.S. for allegedly shortchanging its bankers, failing to pay them properly for meal and rest breaks, also pre-shift work. And Nexstar Media taking a hit after New York appellate court ruled that the company internationally withheld information from DirecTV during negotiations on a new broadcasting agreement. We also have housing data coming in. Tom, what are we starting? Housing starts? Is that what we're looking at first?
We're looking at economic data right now. Thank you, Lisa Mateo.
Housing starts.
It comes out. It's Friday. Housing starts a little moldy, negative 1.5%. Came in as negative 6.8%. I guess it shows a little economic slowdown, a little housing angst. But Damian, if I get disinflation, I get mortgage rates coming down.
Well, this has been a supply issue for as long as I can remember, right? And admittedly, we have seen multifamily construction go up of late, and that's kind of offsetting some of the inflationary pressure we've seen in OER, but this is not good news
OER.
for owner's equipment rent. That would be,
You nailed that. Okay. 10 o'clock, the Michigan set of surveys, including critically the 5 to 10 year inflation forecast. It shows a disinflationary tendency. 3% yes last, ticks down to 2.9%. So maybe disinflation in the wind. Even on a Friday, our economic indicators brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth. With advisor-centric support, future-ready technologies, grow on your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. Michael Purves from Tallbacken joins us. I got 8 ways to go here, Michael Purves. Are we back on trend? Michael Purves, are we back on bull market trend?
Yeah, like if we could just delete 6 days from a lot of charts and you have to ask yourself the question, if we didn't have that big spike and that vicious sell-off earlier this month, Tom, what's really different, right? About the economy, what's different about the interest rate trajectory, or for that matter, corporate earnings, and whether you want to buy or sell the stock market right now. I think we haven't really learned too much from that VIX spike, other than how much market structure, liquidity, and sort of trade leverage, and there's various facets of the trade leverage discussion, are embedded in there. So yeah, I mean, it hasn't changed my thinking that we want to be bullish equities, that big tech will continue to lead the way higher. And I think I never understood why 50 bips was so sort of viciously embraced by the rates markets, because we had a cool jobs print a few weeks ago.
Michael, the unwind of the carry trade, for that matter, the unwind of levered trades. Yet just 3 days ago, I'm reading your note on precious metals here, and you're talking about silver being a leverage play on gold. So do you think that, in a risk-off environment, one where you want to get more defensive, silver's going to play out for you, or is that more of a play for risk-on investors?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a little bit different because to me, it's leverage to the gold price, right? And so the question is to really answer your question, is gold going to do okay in a risk-on environment? Because for silver to really accelerate, you really need gold to have a real rally, not just a quick flip, right? You need something substantial. I do think it feels like something is building here within the gold complex, gold, being sort of the foundation of that, and then silver being a levered play on that. So I think if gold can rally, that's really the question. And I think if gold can really rally, then silver will have outsized returns. If gold just moves up a bit, and then you're right, then silver will be vulnerable to the whatever risk off type dynamics we get there. It has been an underappreciated asset within the gold complex, and I think there's a lot of catch up to happen there.
Can I ask a dumb question? Purves will know this, and Damian, you'll know this. I look at silver as like the third floor at Tiffany, but the answer is silver is solar, right? It's like use of silver in solar.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of new energy or new technology demands for silver. It comes from not just solar, Tom, but water purification, a wide range of electronics, a lot of battery and electric vehicles, employ silver in there. So there are, real industrial applications that are new. And of course, there's the third floor Tiffany demand part of it as well.
Well, Michael, I mean, really, for me, what we're talking about here, and I want to bring it back, gold, silver, precious metals, they're really a defensive asset in a risk-off environment, or one would have you believe. Yet, look at where, and the correlation to U.S. real yields remains very, very strong, right? So when I think of real yield differentials, I think of gold as a hedge against that. And so I'm looking now at U.S. real yields at 1.77%, really the lows of the cycle. I mean, just how much lower in the U.S. real yield can we go? Is that going to give a boost to gold, which is right now trading near all-time highs?
One thing I would push back on you, Damian, on that is that You're right. Normally, you see a pretty clear correlation between real interest rates in the United States and gold, or real rate differentials between the U.S. and places like Japan, for example. But over the last year and a half, we've seen gold push higher despite higher real interest rates here, and despite a strong dollar. So what's going on? I think what's really going on is that there's a lot of central banks, notably in Asia, China in particular, that have been sort of buying the dip. And if you look at the gold rally, it's put in a pretty impressive rally over the last year and a half. That has been a very low volatility rally. Typically, when you get a sort of what I would call a Wall Street gold rally, you see a lot of excitement, and the stuff flies up, and the gold vols fly up. You haven't seen that. And if it's a central bank type of exercise where they're buying dips, but they're not buying at the very tippy top, that's sort of inherently a low, that sort of crushes vol in that asset class there. So I think there's that happening. But here we are looking at an election 4 months from now where both sides are basically endorsing some version of a loose fiscal policy. You haven't seen anything about fiscal tightness from either side here. It's all about, it's really about implementation of fiscal stimulus. That's what the debate is. And so I think the world's looking at that and saying, look, the deficits are high. I'm going to own gold. And Damian, when I look at the gold chart, I'm looking at something that looks like it's going to break higher here. So I think gold, it's really about some of these sort of longer term trends. And if it does break higher, then you'll probably see some a Wall Street rally follow on, become part of that too.
You mentioned Asia, Michael Purves, and just very quickly here, you had an arch call on ADXY. I looked at the Bloomberg Dollar Index, which is weighted much more to EM and to China. And I'm sorry, there's a resilient dollar strength still in place. What do you need to see to say finally the dollar's broken?
Well, are you saying when the DXY, for example, or
I'll let you pick the index.
Okay, but I think the dollar broken. They get sort of into existential questions about just with the reserve status of the reserve currency and so forth. I don't think. If I'm bullish gold and think it's going to go to, pick a number, 2,700, 2,800 later this year and into 25, that doesn't mean the dollar is inherently broken. That does mean people want to sort of build up, a position of gold and maybe hold on to that for some time down the road there. Is the dollar going to break because Europe is suddenly, or get really weaker because Europe is going to suddenly accelerate in economic growth, and the central bank there is going to adopt a much more hawkish policy? I mean, I don't really sort of see that. So I think, to me, like, the dollar breaking, it's got to come down to, let's talk about dollar weakening. It's got to come down to the rest of the world starting to do a lot better economically with a more overtly hawkish posture from their central banks, while the U.S. economy starts falling apart and the Fed does, sort of emergency cuts.
Michael, thank you for the brief. Michael Purves, cash on an August Friday here. Bloomberg Surveillance, brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Accessed Interactive Brokers' vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities. No markups, no built-in spreads, low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. On Friday, we repeat that. ibkr.com/bonds. And we thank IBKR for foundational support of what we're doing. I think it's a really key call here. It's come up 3-4 times this week. The dollar, Damian, is the symbol of the titanic battles between global oversupply, global disinflation, and a fiscal policy in the U.S. that imputes sort of a stable or higher inflation rate.
I got to tell you, I think the currency movement this last 2 weeks has been absolutely telling, absolutely fascinating.
I agree.
And I'll tell you why, because you see those currencies where central banks are, showing their dovish signs. They're basically, they want to cut, they need to stimulate growth, and those currencies are getting hit, getting clocked for that matter. And it's currencies like the Aussie dollar, the Norwegian krona, the British pound to a lesser extent, that are rallying in this because they're high yielders and their central banks aren't ready to cut rates.
It could be interesting, and there'll be some big figure moves perhaps into September. Futures at -24 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Damian, Lisa. Vice President Harris travels to battleground North Carolina today, where she will further put forward her plans for the American economy. She has already unveiled several policy proposals, including calling for the first ever federal ban on price gouging food and groceries. New incentives in the housing industry that include offering $25,000 toward a down payment for first-time buyers and proposing new tax credits like providing $6,000 to families with newborn children. We'll carry Harris's remarks live at 2:45 p.m. on Bloomberg. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump held a press conference in Bedminster, New Jersey. He responded to a question about some Republicans telling him to go easy on the personal attacks on Kamala Harris and instead concentrate on issues.
I think that we're hitting a nerve. I think this is a different kind of a race. All we have to do is define our opponent as being a communist or a socialist or somebody that's going to destroy our country.
Trump also says he's entitled to personal attacks against Harris, adding, "I don't have a lot of respect for her." International mediators are holding a second day of negotiations with Israel to pause the war with Hamas in Gaza. We get more from Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson.
We know the sticking points are significant. It's a bit hard to know what to make of the fact that talks are going on today and that they were scheduled to potentially do so. That could either mean that things are really, really stuck, but they're trying really hard to find a way through. It could also mean that they are seeing little signs of progress. But we do know about those fundamental sticking points. I mean, most broadly, the biggest one is, what does the ceasefire aim to achieve? Is it a pathway to end the war or not?
Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson. Hurricane Ernesto is charging toward Bermuda in the Atlantic. Bermuda is opening shelters and closing government offices. The Category 2 storm has maximum sustained winds of 100 miles per hour. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
It's that time of year. Lisa, jump in here with us as well. I remember when back to school was a hunk of paper, lined paper, 8.5 by 11, whatever.
I remember shopping for crayons and colored
3 by
pencils.
5 cards. Now the list, first of all, I had to get my glasses on for the list. I mean, you go to Staples and the real GDP moves. Back to school is nuts.
It is. And a lot of the schools, too, they have their own specific Amazon lists. So they just give you an Amazon shopping list. And they say, we need this, 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 and this. But it does get a little bit expensive. But sometimes the teachers are the ones who had to kind of dish out the money for it. So.
Oh, no, it's a huge issue. But, it's to me, Lisa, what's so important, and we'll talk about it. I'm sure we'll do it with the newspapers as well. I mean, I remember the glue. Remember the Elmer's? I mean, the glue. Back to school. Mom, I need the glue. No, it has to be Elmer's. That whole thing.
The stick.
Futures at -24. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures falling, and this is after a weak reading on the housing market. New U.S. home construction falls to the slowest pace since May of 2020. Traders now looking to a read on sentiment. That comes out at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. The S&P 500 now set to snap a 6-day winning streak. The S&P futures down 0.4%, 25 points. We have Dow futures down 0.2%, 101 points. NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 108 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%. That's down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.88%, and that's down 3 basis points. To currencies, the dollar weaker on course for a third week of declines. That's the longest such losing streak in more than 5 months. We'll check in with the Japanese yen up 0.9%, 147.91 against the dollar. The euro stronger, British pound stronger. Bitcoin up 2%, 57,850. What's lower? That's shares of Rivian down about 0.1%. The company paused production of that electric commercial van that it makes for Amazon. That was due to a part shortage. And Bloomberg reporting that the rich, well, they're having trouble selling their art, so they're borrowing against it. One wealthy client, Bank of America, put up his fine art collection so he can borrow enough to buy a sports franchise. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Buy a sports franchise.
Yes, Tom and Damian.
Well, Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. This is a joy. To be 29 years old and have the resume she has, a tour of duty with Capital Group Los Angeles, a tour of duty with a small bank on Park Avenue, JP Morgan, and then her leadership at the Union Bank of Switzerland. Nadia Lovell joins us now, Senior U.S. Equity Strategist. Nadia, I love your note because it's really on the bull market tendency. So let's just reaffirm tech leadership in this bull market. Do they lead at the top of the income statement, or is it just about profit down lower?
You know, they do. I mean, when you look throughout the earnings season, this is the area of the market that continues to deliver and beat expectations, and numbers continue to move higher. And so what we have been advising clients to do, particularly our international clients that tends to have less exposure to tech just because of home bias, is to continue to buy on the weakness in tech. I mean, we heard some positive data points throughout the earnings season, particularly around the AI story. I mean, we're continuing to see those hyperscalers, those large hyperscalers, those cloud service providers increase CapEx. And quite frankly, we think that there's upside to CapEx estimates into 2025. I know there's been a lot of discussion around how much is being spent on AI and the potential for return on invested capital. But when we look at the historical data, in fact, the CapEx intensity that normally these tech companies have, we're still below that historical peak. They usually spend over 20% in CapEx intensity, and we're sort of in the mid to high teens. And so we think that there's a 25% growth in CapEx coming next year for these large companies, and that's going to benefit those AI enablers, particularly the semis, power supply companies, and anyone involved in data center builds out. So we continue to think that tech will regain its leadership into 2025.
Nadia, the S&P 500 is currently at what, 5543. You have a year-end target of 5,900. How do we get there, and which sectors lead the way?
Damian, you know, I was on vacation in my home country last week in Antigua, and I thought, what volatility. I come back and we're at the same place that I left off. And so we do think that there is opportunities in that volatility. We do think that tech will be part of that story. Could we see a little bit of burning out of the market? Absolutely, into some of the cyclical areas. I think about industrials or even financials, and even parts of youths that have been benefiting from the AI story and the increase in power demand. And so what's going to drive that is a tech leadership, a little bit of broaden out, but at the end of the day, fundamentally, it's earnings. And when you look at the second quarter earnings season, companies beat expectations, putting out 11% EPS growth for the quarter. And finally, you're seeing that 493 participate, 5% EPS growth after 6 quarters of contraction. Is the economy slowing? Yes, but it's off of a very strong above trend growth last year. Atlanta Fed GDP now is tracking at above 2%. So we continue to advise to buy quality companies on that pullback.
Just quickly here, we're going to digress. I went to Antigua, Nadia Lovell, and I said, okay, why do I have to leave? I mean, do you eat 4 or 5 times a week at Roadie King? in St. John's? I mean, how many times a week when you go home are you eating at Roadie King in St. John's?
Well, I will tell you, Tom, I have quite a bit of family back home, so I tend to enjoy home-cooked meals. Next time you're in Antigua, let me know, and I will connect you with some family members who will fill your tummy.
I think, and we're talking February, Damon. Pick it up on the equity markets with
Tom, I prefer
Roadie
Jolly
King
Harbor.
Lovell.
I love Antigua, but look, let's talk
Jolly
about...
Harbor is great.
Isn't that the best? Yeah, no, I love it there. So look, let's talk about, what we've just seen in the markets these past 2 weeks. I mean, are we really expected to double down on growth here, or is there any sort of argument that investors should be shifting to value, or for that matter, quality? I know you're a fan of quality. I know you want to remain in high quality names, but talk to me about valuations. Do they justify making an investment right this minute?
I think so. When you look at broad S&P, I mean, you have a multiple at, just under 21 times. But the earnings growth is coming through. So that multiple could continue to come down as earnings get revised up, particularly for large cap companies. And then you have a Fed that's on the precipice of a cut. We'll probably have Powell start to message next week at Jackson Hole. I mean, we are neutral in terms of size. We are neutral on small cap. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have an exposure. We do think that you need to have some exposure for diversification purposes. But we wouldn't lean too much into small cap, just given the rally that we've seen over the last couple of months. We question the sustainability of that rally, and the earnings growth just isn't coming through. In fact, what we've seen through the second quarter is continued downward revision to 2024, now expected EPS to contract. And so you want to stay up in quality, in equities, add some value, and have a little bit of a cyclical exposure for, continued robust economic growth.
Well, now your last question here. Defensive sectors such as staples, healthcare, and telecom have a history of outperforming from last hike to first cut. Talk to me about these sectors, these underperforming sectors within the U.S. equity market. What are your thoughts there?
Healthcare, we are neutral on healthcare, but I think the concerns around healthcare, like outside of the diabetes and obesity story, which we continue to like from a secular trend standpoint, there are concerns about, hidden patent cliffs and also regulatory. We did get CMS, I think maybe it was Wednesday or yesterday, in terms of pricing, in terms of drug control. Not as bad as expected, but there are some concerns as the campaign trails pick up. Healthcare tends to get caught in the crosshair of that, so there could be some volatility. Consumer staples, again, we're seeing some concerns around margins as the consumer pushed back some prices. I mean, Wal-Mart did spark the trend yesterday, but a lot of that has to do with some trade down and Walmart taking shares. So I think you have to be selective within consumer staple. Telecom, it's a different animal now because it's all stuck in consumer services, communication services, which is largely really the tech companies. And so I'll prefer a way to play defensive is really through utility.
Nadia, thank you so much. Nice brief. Nadia Lovell to get us into the end of August and into September. She's with UBS. I mean, to me, this quality, you mentioned it, Damian. Mm-hmm. And there's a set of guests that just aren't going to go complex. Keep it simple. Quality, U.S. Just shut up, buy it, and own it.
It's funny that the first thing out of Nadia's mouth when she mentions healthcare is Ozempic. I mean, it's just unbelievable how it's taken over the healthcare space.
This.
I mean, really
John
unbelievable.
Farrow, folks, absolutely nailed this. I was late.
John Farrow doesn't need Ozempic.
Yeah, I don't either.
He's a string bean. He's skinny. I mean, I know I have friends who are on it. I mean, look, it's unbelievable. It's a game changer for a lot of people.
Is it out there? I mean, can you get it? A lot of people tell me it's tough to get.
For men and women, it is tough to get. I mean, you have to get the special shots, too. You have to go to somebody who, it's a whole thing. But my friends who are on it, I mean, they never look so good.
Somebody said in the quote from Devil Wears Prada, we're talking to Oliver Chen about this. This is Meryl Streep, and this is just great. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collection of 8 different designers, and then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin.
I mean,
it is absolutely classic.
I like used clothing. I mean, I used to shop at the Salvation Army. I like that trend clothing, the very Macklemore look, but I mean, I'm getting a little old for that now, so I'm just a Peter Millar guy.
Well, you got to be Peter Millar. I mean, you're at the golf course 8 days a week.
You got to wear your Finance Pro vest.
What cleats do we wear, pray tell? I'm afraid to ask.
I wear G4. I like G4 golf cleats, and I'm a big fan of Grayson Clothiers.
There we go. I have no idea what he just said. I know what Stevie Nicks said. She said, look, stage left, Waddy Wachtel out with Miss Nicks.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene. Damian Sassower is in for Paul Sweeney today. We say good evening, a particular good evening. Across the Pacific Rim on YouTube, we are absolutely blown away by the international reach of YouTube. I featured Seoul, Korea today, but all I can tell you is, just to be as clear as I can, the Pacific Rim YouTube effort has just been stunning. Good morning from Japan around to India in the Friday evening there, and they listen. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, they do. They listen. They listen to you. They listen to me. They listen over an egg cream. They listen over a Shirley Temple, and they listen over a Walter's hot dog.
We're going to get to that in a moment. I'll do the Bloomberg Business Flash here first. Eric Oliner's in the studio. We can barely concentrate. Our Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We've got red on the screen. This is after housing data. Disappointed. We also had some more Fed speak. You had the Fed's Austin Goolsbee told National Public Radio today that the labor market, some leading indicators on the economy are flashing warning signs. Right now, NASDAQ futures down 0.5%, 99 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 111 points. S&P futures down about 0.4%, 25 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.04%, down 5 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.88%, and that's down about 3 basis points. Companies making news. Texas Instruments set to receive $1.6 billion in CHIP Act grants and also $3 billion in loans. And some chip tension. China's AMEC, they're suing the Pentagon to try and get off that blacklist that bans it from doing business with U.S. firms. And finally, shares of the largest U.S. maker of chip manufacturing equipment, we're talking about Applied Materials, lower, down about 3%. Its sales forecast disappointed. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Chicago. Joining us now, Margaret Brennan, a C across the CBS television network, Face the Nation, this Sunday, and of course on the Bloomberg Radio Network. Look for that 10 a.m. Sunday morning. Margaret, on Chicago, the immediate reporting of CBS.
On Chicago, well, we will see Vice President Kamala Harris both say she is lockstep with Joe Biden, but also how she's different from Joe Biden. And it's not clear how she's going to define herself. One of the ways that we expect to see conversation forced on this front is by protesters outside the Democratic National Convention. But so far, Biden and Harris have been lockstep in their unequivocal support for Israel, while also efforting a ceasefire and hostage release, as their negotiators are doing right now in Doha.
Our Chicago guests have been heated over the size of the protests. Do you and your CBS team have any measurement of the scope, the scale of those protests?
We have the estimates that I have seen from local Chicago groups saying you could see as many as 40,000 people, or you could see 200 pro-Palestinian groups. Now, what does it actually look like? They are a distance from the convention, it would appear, according to the planners. And does this in any way, impact the agenda of the Harris platform? Unclear. But what we know is that 3 days ahead of the Democratic National Convention, the top Biden officials, including CIA director, are furiously trying to broker a ceasefire and hostage deal. The timing of that, politics does impact everything for everyone in here, including the decisions the Israeli prime minister makes. But I would expect that she will say that's her answer to the protesters' question. We're trying.
Margaret Brennan, my colleague, Damian Sassower.
Margaret, so, look, we're getting a sense of the economic proposals that Kamala Harris is looking to. We're talking about tax credits, homeowner subsidies, price controls, and the like. Just how much of this is reality? Assuming the Republicans maintain control of Congress, will any of this ever materialize?
Big if. Will any of it materialize? Well, what you're pointing to is the fact that you can't just wave a magic wand on this stuff and that you do need Congress to go along with it, just as you would the Trump-Vance proposal of expanding the child tax credit to $5,000. Waltz and Harris want to expand it to $6,000 per child. yeah, you need Congress to go along with it. So, some of this is rhetoric, and we need to level set.
Right.
We'll do some of that with Austin Goolsbee, who will be my guest from the Chicago Fed on Sunday.
See how she does that? She goes right where I wanted to go. I mean, somebody whispered this to me, Margaret Brennan, and this is the face of nation difference, folks. It's not a lot of political blah, blah, blah. It's the Vice President of the United States trying to frame out some form of economic plan, as well as a former president, and you have Goolsbee on. Margaret Brennan, what will you ask the head of the Chicago Fed about our present inflation?
Well, we definitely want to know what his view is on what seems to be the consensus that the Fed will lower rates in September, but also want to understand his point of view on the suggestion here that, inflation is driven by corporations. That's essentially the assumption in the Harris plan,
right?
That she's going to target corporations for hiking prices. We want to also talk to him about the lower mortgage rates we are seeing. One of the things that comes up again and again on the campaign trail is the housing crisis, the shortage of available and affordable housing. We want to talk to him about some of that.
Right.
But it should be interesting. You already have economists like Jason Furman, formerly of the Obama administration, being fairly critical of the Harris proposals.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah,
Saw that.
and yesterday we listened to Donald Trump in a fairly rambling press conference he said about inflation, but the conversation went so many other places, it wasn't clear what the plan is to deal with it.
On the CBS television network, Margaret Brennan, Face the Nation, look for that Sunday morning. And of course, listen to Face the Nation, 10 a.m., 2 p.m., New York, Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 1061, Boston, Newbury Report, Face the Nation on Bloomberg Radio. A week ago, surveillance lobster correspondent David Gura gave us the word on Reds of Wiscasset. In honor of the 105th anniversary of the best hot dog in America, Eric Weiner of Bloomberg News joins us. He is the surveillance hot dog correspondent, and you viscerally live the lines out of Walter's Dogs in Mamaroneck. Why are there lines out of that little shop?
It's a tiny little hot dog stand. It's been there forever. It's legendary. People do come from distances to go there, but it's really a locals thing. Like every Little League team goes there after they win.
It's a fabric of childhood.
Exactly. And the hot dogs are excellent. They do this weird thing with they dip them in butter or whatever, and then they put them on the griddle and
split that dog. It's delish.
Oh, it's awesome. And then they split it, and so it's sort of crispy, and the bun is excellent. The weird thing is, and this is where they kind of lose me, is no sauerkraut. I'm a sauerkraut guy, and my wife is sauerkraut. So that is an issue for them. But the sides are also awesome. So they'll make a real egg cream. You mentioned egg creams earlier. They make a great egg cream.
They make cinnamon sticks, those fennel cake sticks, all that good stuff. Nice little powdered sugar.
Waffle fries.
In a time of McDonald's, and Lisa Mateo, you mentioned Subway earlier today. These are community restaurants. Eric, can I assume every high school kid would kill to work at Walter's Dogs?
Or they're there all the time. I mean, it's like my kid, after when he's done with a test, he'll go over there and get himself a dog, because Mamaroneck High School has a open plan, so you can just walk off and go to a restaurant.
Is that right? Mamaroneck High School students have an open plan with that's not right.
Isn't that awesome?
My son's a blind.
Oh no, my school wasn't like that.
That's crazy.
No, where afterthought goes, the seniors could go over to Walter's Dogs, but not the freshmen.
Oh no, this is actually I'm not sure about freshmen. Sophomores definitely. He's but the kid grew up on Walter's Dogs. It's really sort of a fixture.
To your appearance here and the work you've done as surveillance hot dog correspondent, we've had a national reach. Dodger Dogs. Haley Koufax out in LA just saying, "Shut up, Tom. It's a Dodger dog. Hot dogs matter." Eric Weiner, are hot dogs healthy?
I wouldn't eat them necessarily for the health value.
We go to surveillance nutrition correspondent El Mateo on this. Lisa, come on. What's the minimum dogs you've ever done?
Probably 3. But the thing is, you never really know what's inside of the hot dog.
So that's their thing. They have a special recipe that's all meat. And it really does taste.
Do they make the hot dogs?
They
right
have
there?
their own hot dogs. Well, I think they're actually now made. It's the same recipe though that like the original Walter did. And the funny thing about this place is like Larchmont, Mamaroneck is a weird town, so like we have a lot of money. You'll see like a Bentley parked, like all these Little League kids, and then there's like some guy in Gucci loafers with a Bentley ordering like 25 hot dogs.
How much are they? $12 a piece?
No, they're like $4 or whatever. It's
$3.80.
You gotta have multiple dogs, or you have to get a double. Really, like that's my thing is
Damian,
the double.
Well, we're not talking about Ralph's Italian Ices either, because let's be clear, if you want to talk about institutions in Westchester and you want to be a little bit more healthy, Lisa Matteo, Ralph's Italian Ices is where you want to be going. I mean, it's delicious. They've got a gazillion flavors, and that's kind of where my kids went after Little League practice.
I want to get this in as a serious note. Eric, you lead so much of our market coverage. What was it like 8 days ago when the markets blew up?
The 3% day?
Yeah.
The 3%.
What was it like?
Well, it's interesting. So we were looking at it. I'm senior editor for
Is that a 2
stocks.
dog day or a 3 dog day?
That was a 4 dog day. But I will say that we were kind of expecting a bounce back. Like we did not see it in the stock market. We did not see it as a catastrophe. We saw it as a pullback. And it's something that actually a lot of people that we talked to had been saying was overdue. So they were saying, like an 8 to 10% pullback would be normal. So we were kind of waiting for the follow through, and now we've seen it.
In the last 2 days when Walter's Dogs was so kind enough to contact me on this, and thank you, the Warrington family, for that. But, I look at this and I have, what's an Uber to Mamaroneck?
From here.
Yeah.
Probably over $100. I would say 150.
It's thereabouts. Yeah.
So round trip, if I do a $250 road trip with Afterthought for hot dogs, it sounds like a value add.
I can pick them up the next time I'm coming in town. I'll pick them up and bring them in for you. I think they've got these little pig in a blankets.
They do.
Which are actually easy to transport.
The potato puffs. They also do Gold Belly. And we went to a Neil Young show. Yeah, where you order it. We went to a Neil Young show in Bridgeport at the amphitheater there, and there's a Walter's hot dog stand in the middle of the. It's like wild. I don't know where this comes from.
Eric Weiner, thank you so much. Surveillance hot dog correspondent. I don't know Lisa, what are we doing next week? End of summer next week.
End of summer.
We're doing lobster, hot dogs. There's got to be something. Sai, what should we do next week in terms of nutrition for the summer? Figure something out. Don't tell me 3-2 beer.
We could do the crusted halibut at the Mediterranean on Greenwich Ave. It's the best in the city. Best in the city.
What?
Their halibut, their dinner halibut. I can't even tell you how good it is. Thinking about it's making my mouth water. It's so good. It's not so expensive.
Me and Michael Barr are looking at Coney Island hot dogs for what? They went over $2, Michael Barr, and it was a scandal, right?
Yeah, I remember that. Like $1 a gallon for gas.
Crusted halibut in Greenwich.
Hold on, I'm going to get you the exact name of what it is. It's unbelievable.
Okay, you do the research on it. Have one of the interns do that.
It's still not better than the Costco dog.
Futures deteriorate, -24. Dow futures -94. NASDAQ down 0.5%. I'm going to call a listless south here right now. Key economic data in 45 minutes. The Michigan report. BitDog up 1,358,000 on Bitcoin. Brent crude $79.38. That's just under $80 a barrel. Gold. Damian Sassower nailing it on gold. $25.25. That's a Chicago price for gold. Nobody got that idea. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures still falling after more housing data. Total housing starts fell 6.8% to a 1.2 million annualized rate last month. That's the biggest drag that was coming from single-family units. Now, building permits decreased 4% to a 1.4 million annual rate. So now we have NASDAQ futures down 0.4%, 86 points. Dow futures down 0.2%, 81 points. S&P futures down 0.3%, 21 points. We have the two-year yield at 4.05%. That's down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.89%, and that's down 2 basis points. Europe stock 600 headed for its best week since May. Right now, we have it at up about nearly a 0.1%. In Germany, though, those shares of Bayer, they're higher, up 13% after that court victory in its Roundup weed killer litigation. And shares of dating app Bumble, they're lower. They're down 4%. TD Cowen downgraded the stock to hold it from buy. They say there's an uncertain path to recovery for it. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Yeah, that's what happened when I used Bumble. There was an uncertain recovery.
I'm sure.
As well. Didn't the stock tank a couple weeks ago?
Yes, it
Or
did.
I get that right? Okay.
Not doing so well.
Christopher, thank you so much. Off of our intense interview with Eric Weiner, surveillance hot dog correspondent, Christopher says, it's just simple as this, Tom. Walter's mustard. Lisa, they make their own mustard.
That is it is a spicy mustard?
It's a spicy mustard.
It has to be the
but
spicy
not
mustard.
like they have in Ireland and England. I said this to Afterthought the other day. I said, you have no idea how hot the mustard is in France or England. It's way more spicy. Ours is bland. An expert on mustards across the continent of Europe, Ethan Devitt joins us right now with Moneta, hugely qualified, a really holistic view of the market. Ethan, after all that we've been through, you're not going to tell me to go to cash. You're going to tell me to participate in the equity markets. And there's an academic construct of 60% equity, 40% bonds. Is that shattered?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to, I think 60-40, to use your expression, no longer cuts the mustard. It would be clearly a balanced portfolio that has gone somewhat out of favor. We saw that in 2022. Both sides of that portfolio behaved poorly. And now we have a situation where even the smallest retail investor is starting to look around the corner at alternatives. So I wouldn't say 60-40. I would actually advocate for far more diversification today than 60-40. But I also wouldn't say staying in cash is going to work so well when we all know that interest rates are coming down.
So what are your diversifiers?
Diversifiers start from the traditional ones. And even though you mentioned housing starts being lower, we still know that real estate is a pretty solid diversifier. And as bond substitutes come back into favor, real estate stocks, other kind of bond proxies, those are good diversifiers. I really like different sources of growth. So you don't just get growth through technology stocks. You also get it through some of the spin-offs of that. You get it through healthcare, aspects of healthcare. You can also get it when you're looking around the world. There are aspects of European and non-US stocks that do provide good sources of growth. And we know that emerging markets, a traditional source of growth, perhaps has not been doing so well recently, quite overlooked as a result. But I would say you want to diversify your sources of growth. It can't all be about big tech.
Okay, it can't all be about big tech, but the fact is, if we look for growth, we've got to find growth with large free cash flow. How do you link the two together where you get ample free cash flow growth with growth of revenue?
Well, let's look at what companies have been rewarded this week. So we've seen companies like Cisco announcing cuts to their workforce, and they instantly then get a boost in the stock market because they're seen as having that discipline, retaining their margins, cost control, and that boosts them. So that allows them to protect the cash. So we're going to see that kind of belt tightening around the board in order that these companies can continue to pay their dividends. Cutting a dividend, slicing it, is going to be a very bad signal, and nobody wants to signal anything over and above what is, was absolutely essential at the moment in terms of negativity. So I would say you want to be looking at those both defensive stocks, but also the solid stocks that have been overlooked.
Tell me about the United Kingdom. We've had a number of guests on that say, given the immense political turmoil, the uncertainties about Tottenham football here into the opening of the Premier League, that there's value in the FTSE, and I would suggest it goes over to the multinationals in Dublin as well. Is there a value in United Kingdom, Ireland equities?
There has been some value. They've certainly been beaten down. Until a few months ago, the FTSE basically did not participate in any of the strength we were seeing across developed markets. Europe was far ahead of that. We did have the election on July 4th. There was a little bit of uncertainty going into that. We have still got the recollection of the Trump economics and what happened in the UK market then, as well as the risk of the decimation of many of the pension funds. So it could be that foreigners are the only people that are really picking over UK stock markets right now, because the domestic investor is not that keen on UK stocks at the moment. They're getting a boost from being overseas. I'm going to do an audible with you. And Ethan Devitt, folks, is hugely qualified. Our academics are they're just flat out spectacular in their eclecticism. It's a huge statement on United Kingdom and Irish education. Ethan, one of the flaps that we're having over here is how American multinationals led by pharmaceuticals have set up shop in Dublin, obviously with huge gain to Ireland, but the tax shift from the United States over to tax revenue in Ireland, and you can argue it's obviously at a lower rate and all that. Is that key to Irish prosperity, those American companies going over to Dublin? It has been certainly part of the very strong economic growth that we've seen in Ireland. That has been a part of it, not just American companies. We've seen many global multinationals locate in Dublin. We have a highly educated workforce. Thank you for the shout out, but it always has been one of our hallmarks in Ireland. We have a lot of professionals who went abroad, as I did, and returned to the country. And the challenges we have now are around infrastructure and housing, simply there not being enough of that. So that has been a huge part of the Irish recovery, but much of it is now self-sustaining. We're not simply reliant on a low tax solution that we do on a short-term basis. These are now here to stay. Many of these companies, they've invested in Ireland. They like what they see in terms of the infrastructure. So yes, a big part of it, but we also know it's a controversial positioning when we look stateside.
Ethan, thank you so much. Ethan Devitt, really, really appreciate it. Can't wait. Lisa, the remote we're going to do in Dublin with Ethan Devitt, it's got to happen. She's with Moneta, and we'll see on that. Last night, and I say good morning to the Blue of New York City, NYPD. Officer Schmidt was there, and I was talking to him. This is with the new enhanced force in a somewhat fragile Central Park on the island of Manhattan. And he said to me, OMG, it's the voice. So we had to do obligatory selfies for NYPD. And I say good morning to all of our policemen and firefighters to start the day with Bloomberg Radio 1130 in New York. They're in their cars, that they start. But we go into this weekend, Lisa Mateo, with a reality in New York City of an enhanced police effort in Central Park. It's a different New York City
on this
August Friday.
Yeah, it definitely is a different. You've been hearing so many different stories. Michael Barr has been reporting on them.
Yeah, Michael's done a great job.
He's done a great job at it, but it has a lot of people on edge, worried about their safety. I know a lot of students in the colleges around the area too concerned about that as well. So it is a concern heading into, especially, winding down, the summer months. So that is
we're ramping up for fall sports as well. So, granted, it is fancy schools wrapped around Central Park, but they use Central Park from 2 p.m. on is their playground. And you wonder where that's going to be the first week of September. But Lisa and I say good morning to all of the NYPD and the fire department, as well as they protect us across the 5 boroughs this morning. Futures, I don't want to say they cratered or they're down. There's no drama to it. It's a Friday. I mean, look where we are in level, folks, on futures. 55.46 SPX level. Dow, wow, 40,623. NASDAQ down 0.5%, 19,488. The Russell, I don't even look at the small cap. I'm with Ethan Devitt on that. I'm looking at the SPX, the Dow, and the NASDAQ 100 as well. The VIX 15.61, a little bit elevated. It's pullback Friday is what we'll call it. Please stay with us on Android Auto, got that right, Apple CarPlay, on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts worldwide. that's out on YouTube. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Damian Sassower with your opening bell report. So more data out once again before the bell. It wasn't good news for the housing market. We had new U.S. home construction in the U.S. fell in July to the lowest level since May of 2020. Housing starts decreased 6.8%. Building permits also fell, dropping 4%. So let's get to the market reaction right now. We'll start with the S&P 500 down about 0.2%, 15 points, 5,527. The Dow, little change, down about 29 points, 40,540. And the Nasdaq down 0.4%. 76 points at 17,519. We have the 2-year yield at 4.05%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.89%, and that's down 2 basis points. We have spot gold higher, $2,487 an ounce. Brent crude $79 a barrel. WTI crude $76 a barrel. Quick check of currencies. The dollar weaker. Japanese yen up 1%. Euro stronger. British pound stronger. Bitcoin up 3% at 58,400. 500. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thank you so much. This is a really wonderful conversation. Damian Sassower is going to kick us off here. This is with a gentleman with a terrific commitment to the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, definitive within the Chicago community. On doing, Damian, what's so important, it's not just about 7 big Wall Street firms. And so people that are at, say, Winston and Strawn a few years ago, they lawyer up.
Yep.
And they go out there and they serve the middle market of
right.
private debt.
Well, you mentioned the 7 big firms. And, when I think of private credit, I think of firms like Brookfield, Blackstone, BlackRock, Ares, KKR. And then I think of Monroe Capital, $20 billion in assets, been doing it for over 2 decades. We have Ted Koenig, chairman and CEO of Monroe Capital, here in studio, Tom. And the question I have is, what is private credit? I mean, let's be clear. I mean, it can mean so many different things. It's such a broad definition. Tell us what you view private credit as.
Thanks, Damian. Private credit is everything that the banks used to do that don't do anymore. We fund private equity firms in buyout lending. After the credit crisis, the Fed tried and succeeded in moving most of the leveraged finance out of the system because they thought it was endemic and it could create bank failures. So when they moved it out of the system, they moved it onto institutional investors who were better able to hold and maintain that investment so it wasn't moved or marked every quarter.
Warehoused on their balance sheets.
Exactly right.
I mean, so, Tom, what Ted's saying here is it goes to the trading desk themselves. They just don't have access to grind the way they used to. Big inventories of bonds that they could basically lean into and make markets in. Isn't that right, Ted?
It's the fastest growing alternative asset class since the credit crisis. 25% a year growth rates.
David Rubenstein sat in that chair here a couple days ago. We asked him about private equity and that people are trying to exit private equity. They're having trouble getting out, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have the same problem in private credit, private debt? Are people trying to exit?
Great question.
It's my only good one this week. It's happening a little late on a Friday, Lisa, but help me with that.
Private credit is a fundamentally different asset class than private equity. Private equity is an illiquid, long-term asset class that's very dependent on the markets. It's dependent on interest rates. It's dependent on the ability for private equity firms to be able to sell. It depends on purchase price multiples. It depends on EBITDA. It depends on growth. It depends on expanding valuations. Private credit, on the other hand, is at the top of the capital structure, floating rate, current return. Think about pension funds. Think about insurance companies. Your insurance companies are writing insurance on lives for 40, 50 years. They have an actuarial assumption of 5-6% in order to generate those returns. Pension funds have a need for 7-8% a year to cover health, welfare, benefit plans. All that can't be funded by private equity because those are 7, 8, 10-year lockups. Private credit, the money goes in the ground each quarter, and each quarter there's a return driven back to those investors. So since the financial crisis, it's insurance companies, pension funds, and now high net worth individual investors have taken on this asset class and found the same thing institutional investors are finding.
Well, Ted, take me through this, because when I think of private credit in its truest sense of direct lending, you're lending to companies or to whatever, but they're generating earnings. They're generating cash flow so they can pay back their creditors. But then I hear about technology finance and venture debt, and just by the very nature of the people you're lending to, I mean, how are they paying back if they're not generating any cash flow?
Another good question. Private credit is dependent on cash flow because we generate current returns. Our investors want current returns. We're not generating 3, 4, 5x like the private equity firms used to do. We're generating 10, 11, 12% current returns. And whether you're in the U.S. pension fund or UK pension fund, a Middle East sovereign wealth fund, they all want that return. So today, all that capital that that used to be 60-40 bonds, I heard it earlier in your discussion with AOFIN, what's happened now is that 60% that used to be bonds in traditional fixed income has moved over to alternative fixed income because the marks are so stable. Private credit has generated very, very stable consistent returns with no market volatility.
The cynics are going to say you're grossing out 10, 12% versus, say, 6%, whatever, through leverage. Where are the shadows in the private credit market?
You know, it's interesting. I've been doing this 24 years. I started my firm before it was sexy or cool to be in private credit. We just tried to deliver middle market companies with a solution. And you mentioned it, there's 7 big companies, mostly all Wall Street guys.
Yeah.
I've got 520 middle market companies in our portfolio today. Middle market, middle America, companies doing between 15 million EBITDA and 50 million EBITDA. That's the backbone of the U.S. That's 50% of the GNP and the economy in the U.S.
Let's go, Eli. Let's go Indiana here right now. I want to talk about Kelley School in a moment. Does Eli Lilly need private credit?
Eli Lilly does not need private credit because they can tap the syndicated bond market. However, when there's world challenges, where there's economic challenges, where there's macro events happening, there's no certainty because all of that syndicated debt is best efforts debt and it trades every day. And that syndicated best efforts debt does not provide certainty. So today, for example, last quarter, private credit outpaced syndicated loans by 4.5 times.
Wow.
4.5 times.
Wow. In the time we've got left, one of the biggest problems we have, I mean, the president of Indiana University was on, and I was talking to her about her take out of Purdue, and the secret weapon she's got up at West Lafayette is a guy named James Bullard, who forever will be Bloomington, and his PhD in economics there is leadership at the St. Louis Fed. What is the Kelley School distinction in Bloomington? What is the difference in the Kelley School?
I'm an alum of the Kelley School. I know Pam very well. It is the 8th best business school in the U.S. The 7 best business schools ahead of them are all private. This is a publicly funded university that has generated academic excellence.
So what's the distinction? Mathematics? What's the difference?
Accounting, economics, taxation, and it turns out in kids that get jobs. That's the key. When you rate schools today, it's alumni support, it's teachers, and it's kids getting jobs. And the kids that generate jobs come out of Indiana University and go all over Wall Street today.
David, get one more in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just have to say, I'm listening to your story. I'm listening to what Monroe Capital does well, and 20 years in the business, Ted. And, to me, it seems like it's so relationship driven. Those same people you've been lending to for all this time, you're so intimate with their companies, with their businesses, and they keep coming back to you because they trust you as their lender, as opposed to maybe going the syndicated route or going to big banks. Is that right?
That's the key. That's the key. We've done this for 20 years. We've done over 1,000 transactions. 40% of our transactions each year come out of our portfolio, repeat borrowers. And that's not going to change. At institutions, banks have come and gone. When I started this business, there were 15,000 banks in the U.S. Today, there's 4,000.
Amazing.
Ted Koenig, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Monroe Capital with us. Lovely to have him in from Chicago. Please don't be a stranger. Lisa, can you get Mr. Koenig up so Mr. Barr can slide into the bar zone? I mean, folks, it's a
Ted. Don't let the stage door, Ted. See you later. Goodbye.
Forever. I mean, the interns, Lisa. The interns are all hungover. What can I say? I don't. It's
get back to Chicago, Ted. The White Sox last place.
Our intern efficiency, Ted. Our intern efficiency is just, it's just, I think they're all going to end up being traitors.
No, do you think? No, I'll tell you, so. Young Jack Sassower got into Indiana. He chose University of Miami because of the weather, but I mean, what a great university that is. I love Bloomington.
Cash flow got into Indiana Theater, and they were really kind. Okay. And he ended up in Pittsburgh at a small theater institution there. But, Indiana, we said good morning to Amy Rosen, executive producer, Surveillance with John Farrow, Lisa Bramett. She's an Indiana alum. That's good to see as well. Ted Koenig there from Monroe Capital of Chicago this morning. The markets are open. They're red, but they're a Friday sort of
sleepy.
Sleepy. Negative 37 on the Dow. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. Vice President Kamala Harris will hold a campaign rally in North Carolina today to talk about the economy. We'll bring you her comments live on Bloomberg starting at 2:45 p.m. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump gave his second news conference in as many weeks at his New Jersey golf club yesterday. His supporters begged the Republican nominee to stick with talking about policy, but Trump says he is entitled to personal attacks against Harris, adding, "I don't have a lot of respect for her." And we are hearing from the relatives of the Pennsylvania firefighter fatally shot during the assassination attempt on former President Trump at a rally last month. Corey Comprator's family says they have hired an attorney and want answers from Rally Security, widow Helen Comprator.
I'm angry, obviously. My husband took a bullet for him, but, that unfortunately was the plan that day.
Helen Comprator spoke to ABC Pittsburgh affiliate WTAE. The White House has walked back President Biden's comment on the potential of a new Venezuelan election. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter explains.
The president asked by reporters as he walked to board his Marine One helicopter whether he supported new elections in Venezuela, and he responded, "I do." Well, there have been charges, of course, that the Nicolas Maduro election was rigged, but now a spokesman for the National Security Council said Biden intended to speak on the absurdity of Maduro failing to come clean after claiming victory. Spokesman Sean Savit saying it is clear Maduro did not win. Maduro responded the U.S. should not interfere, that Venezuelans are in charge in their homeland. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Hurricane Ernesto gained strength overnight. Ernesto is now a Category 2 hurricane, at least for now, and taking aim at Bermuda. The storm is also having an impact on the East Coast, bringing dangerous rip currents to the shores. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Got an email in, a very important email. Ask Damian about the heat. You're out on the golf course. Do you use an umbrella like the fancy people?
Absolutely
on the PGA?
not. No, absolutely not. And by the way, those guys with those bunker hats when they're out there, those like cow, I hate that too. I'm strictly a baseball cap wearing kind of guy.
Baseball
cap. I like shorts.
Are you carrying your own bag? Or?
I can carry. I mean, I prefer not to. I like caddies. Just like anybody else. I mean, who would?
How do you carry a bag and have stability on? Like a 9-iron up to the green.
Well, I like the 2-looper. I like it's more like a backpack now. It's not the one arm anymore, Tom. So I do a 2-looper when I carry. I keep my bag light. I don't need a lot of clubs. All I need is a lot of love.
Do you use the cart or do you not use the golf cart?
I do sometimes. Yeah, sometimes.
What's a cart cost?
I think it's like 20, 25.
Oh, come on.
No, it's not bad. That's not terrible because it's private golf club. You really shouldn't even be paying for that. I can't even believe I'm saying that.
Do you have a driver?
No, such a bad question. I can't even believe this. What are we dealing with? Scotty Cameron, help me. Take me away.
Down, negative 57. It's a Friday. Stay with us. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Stocks losing their steam at the end of a strong week, and this is after a disappointing reading on the housing market. Also, words from the Fed's Austin Goolsbee, well, that didn't help either. He said the economy and labor market are flashing warning signs. So right now, we'll head to the S&P 500, snapping a 6-day winning streak. It's down about 0.1%, 10 points. The Dow, little change, down about 25 points. The Nasdaq down 0.2%, or 47 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.05%, down 4 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.89%, and that's down 2 basis points. To currencies, a dollar on course for a third week of declines. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro stronger, British pound stronger, Bitcoin up about 3% at 58,500. Nvidia leading the losses in mega caps right now, down about 0.2%. Then we have Applied Materials, the largest U.S. maker, chip manufacturing equipment. They're down about 4%. Sales forecast disappointed there. And Rivian shares falling, down about 0.8%. Paused production of that electric commercial van that it makes for Amazon, and that was due to a part shortage. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Gold up $24. Make it $42. $25.34 on gold. That's a something statistic. Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. All the YouTube chats for Lisa, but folks, it's simple. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast out on YouTube. It's a huge new global experiment for Bloomberg. We're thrilled with the results, humbled by the results, particularly in the Asia evening. John, thank you so much. Have been listening, streaming out here since the Ken Pruitt days. Really appreciate what you all do, particularly Lisa, and love the YouTube option now. John, thank you for that. Lisa gets all the love notes. I get the hate mail. Speaking of hate mail, I got a hate note from Chris Brigatti. He said he came all the way in last time, and Biden was doing something with Harris or Trump with JD. I can't remember. And so Chris was shown the door. Thank you so much, Class Act, for your patience to come here. I want to talk about muni bonds. I got to go out to Walters and Mamaroneck, and I don't think I can afford the Walters Mustard split hot dog unless I'm taking advantage of triple tax New York's bonds. Is the whole state tax option still valid, or should I be looking nationally?
It's still very valid. Sometimes you might have a little trouble getting the exact bond you want, but patience is a virtue. You can eventually get it if you stick to it.
How do you get the bond you want?
You have to find the right thing. I mean, it's a matter of the market is very by appointment. So you might say you want to buy a Westchester GO bond, for example. If it's not available for sale, you just can't get it. So you have to be patient and look for something comparable, something similar, and you keep your eyes open, you're going to find it.
You know, the Trump trade is a very different animal when you're looking at municipal debt. I wonder if you could walk myself and our audience through, those themes that, municipal bond investors are looking at as it relates to the 2024 election.
Yeah, the election has got a couple of variances going for it, and they can create some problems for investors and thoughts about it. I think both administrations have the potential to be inflationary, and ultimately municipal bonds are a fixed income product, and they follow that sort of the market. So it's a matter of, can you look through that, and can you be smart about where you put your money, and understanding the inflationary aspects of both administrations. And the Trump trade is definitely an inflationary one, so you want to be careful of when and how you invest.
Chris, a theme Eric Kazatsky, my colleague, the chief municipal bond strategist here at BI, kind of has highlighted for me and flagged for me, if Trump is indeed elected, is the tax exemption that, our big private universities are getting from the U.S. government. And, a lot of these universities, and even the state ones, but really the private, they're big issues of bonds, big issues of muni debt. Talk to us a little bit about, do you see any potential in the wake of some of the rioting and the things we've seen on these college campuses that they're going to get that tax exempt status pulled?
I don't think they're going to get pulled, but I think they're going to run into problems down the road. So, it's very well embedded in the system. It does ultimately help students and help, families be able to get their kids into colleges. Right. So pulled is a little bit aggressive, but there are challenges at the college level. And if you go down the spectrum of colleges and universities, there might not be the top tiers. They're losing enrollment. They're having a hard time getting revenues in, and it's a struggle.
Tell me about with the Chicago DNC convention going on. Everybody, Balance of Power will be out there leading our coverage as well. All the, California crisis, they recover. Illinois crisis. Has Illinois recovered?
It has recovered quite a bit. The money that came in from the federal government during the pandemic really did help kind of foster a little bit of a benefit to the coffers within the infrastructure of such entities. So they were able to build it up a little bit, but you look at the management and the administration, they have a challenge. Costs have gone higher. They did a lot of hiring, increases their costs. Right. So they're spending the money that they got.
So in an individual portfolio, Lisa, with all that she's saving at Costco, it's amazing. If you want to set up an individual portfolio, what's the minimum money you need, and how many bonds do you have to acquire to get Brigati SWBC diversification?
I think you want to be smart about it. I think the first answer to that question, which is a great question, is as long as you have somewhere between 12 to 20 bonds in a portfolio, you're very well diversified. You've kind of hit a key point and you're able to really do well. If you look at the opportunity for the minimum amount to spend, you could kind of get away with maybe $500,000 worth in a municipal portfolio. I prefer to see 1 million bonds in a portfolio. You can get a critical mass of size, get that diversification, and be smart and be able to get bonds when and where you want.
Chris, I'm going to reach below here. I'm going to pull out the Fabozzi book, and I'm going to go to the Municipal Bond Chapter 22, and I'm going to ask you about tax-exempt yields, and on a relative basis, how do they stack up versus nominals and versus U.S. Treasuries right now?
Kind of middle of the road. I wouldn't say they're very, very cheap, but they're still attractive. I think you go down the credit curve, they look very attractive. You look into high yield credits, you can get a 9% tax.
So what's like a municipal high yield issuer? I mean, give me a...
Brightline.
Okay.
There's
what sectors are more high yieldy than other? I mean, which?
Great question. You start to look into healthcare, which is very, very much in the high yield space. Housing authorities, things along those lines.
Yeah, but they're there because they're garbage. How do you protect yourself from a train wreck?
There's good and bad, and that's where you have a good portfolio manager for. You don't go into high yield credit without knowing what you're doing, and you have to have a good portfolio manager. A lot of money has flown into high yield portfolios this year.
How much supply is there, though? I mean, like, it's got to be a small market, right?
It's relatively small. So
it's a scarcity issue. I mean, sort of.
It's another reason to get a portfolio manager that can get the bonds you want and do the research.
Is it just as simple like in schools, like local schools or whatever? If it's a rich neighborhood, it must be a good credit, and if it's a poor neighborhood, beware.
It kind of does divide quite similarly along those lines. I would say that's a very fair, back of the envelope analysis.
And there's a big regional component as well, right? I mean, the geography of the United States is not something to be taken lightly, right? Especially as it relates to tax.
True. I did an analysis back in the spring, and we looked at the demographic changes that happened post financial crisis and post-pandemic, and looking at the movement throughout the country, out of the Northeast, out of the Midwest, down into Texas, Tennessee, Florida. You've seen some struggles in the Northeast and Midwest credits simply because they've lost the tax base. Yeah. They still have the same infrastructure needs, and that has caused some problems and need for investors to be able to buy credits in those space.
Well, I just find it really interesting. I mean, look, if you talk to Eric Kazatsky, who probably right now isn't in the office down in Princeton, New Jersey, my colleague, but he would probably talk to you about yield differentials and yield pickup. Talk to us about, on a relative basis, not just versus U.S. Treasuries, but other credit markets as well. I mean, do munis really offer that value?
They do offer that value, and the credit quality and the credit worthiness is one of the highest, with very, very low default rates. So you get better bang for your buck, so to speak, when you go into the high yield and even single A rated municipal credits.
We don't do enough on this. Don't be a stranger. Chris Brigatti, thank you so much.
Chris Brigatti, thank
With
you.
SWBC, as we take advantage of tax-free bonds. Jamie emails in, first-time listener. Thank you so much, Jamie, for that. His brother is up in Mamaroneck, and he rents the Walter's Hot Dogs food truck for his son's birthday party.
Well, bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, at the end of the bar mitzvah, you want to have the food truck ready to go. So people so they grab and go, right? I mean, that's how it works.
Is this like Walter's hangover food?
I mean, of course, yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what it's there for. But I mean, Tom, there is a big competition for the end of night. Some people like McDonald's there. They order chicken McNuggets, which is what we did. But, Walters plays a big role there.
Thank you for coming in on a Friday. Damian Sassower.
Are we done? Oh, my God.
It was either you or John Tucker. I lucked out. Damian Sassower, thank you so much. In the next hour, John Tucker. Good morning. Have a good weekend.
Tuesday's gray and I don't care about you, it's Friday.